Hey everyone, I'm the storyteller, and I'm here to help you relax tonight. I know a lot of you use this video to fall asleep, so before we start, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, tell me in the comments, where are you from, and what time is it there? Now get comfortable, take a deep breath, and just relax. The neighbor who wasn't there. I was 13 when we moved to the suburbs outside Portland. One of those perfectly planned neighborhoods where all the houses look the same and everyone pretends their life is perfect. Our house was at the end of a cul-de-sac, one of those spots that real estate agents love to talk about because it's supposed to be safer for kids, less traffic, more privacy. The house next door had been empty for 3 years according to the realtor. Something about the previous owners going through a messy divorce and the property being tied up in legal battles. It was identical to ours. Same floor plan but mirrored, with overgrown grass and newspapers piling up on the porch that nobody ever seemed to clear away. My bedroom window faced their house, looked right into what would have been the same room on their side, and I always kept my curtains closed because something about those dark windows made me uncomfortable. The first week was normal, just unpacking boxes and trying to figure out where everything went in the new house, arguing with my younger brother about who got which room. Then on Monday night I heard music coming from next door. Old jazz music like my grandfather used to play, scratchy and distant like it was coming from an old record player. I peeked through my curtains and saw lights on in the house. Warm yellow light moving from room to room like someone was walking around turning on lamps. My mom was excited when I told her the next morning, said it would be nice to have neighbors finally, maybe they had kids my age. But when she went over with a plate of cookies to introduce herself, nobody answered the door, and when she peeked through the windows, everything was dark and dusty inside. The next night, the music was back, louder this time, and I could see shadows moving behind the curtains, the silhouette of someone dancing alone in what would have been their living room. I watched for almost an hour, hypnotized by the way the shadow swayed and spun, until suddenly it stopped, and I realized the shadow was standing at the window, looking straight at me. I dropped my curtain and jumped back, my heart pounding, but I could still feel those eyes on me, watching through the fabric, waiting for me to look again. Every night after that, the music would start at exactly 9:30, always the same songs in the same order, and the shadow would dance, and I would try not to look, but always ended up peeking through the curtains. My parents never heard the music, even when I dragged them into my room and made them listen. They just heard the normal sounds of the neighborhood, cars passing, dogs barking, but not the jazz. After 2 weeks I finally saw her clearly, not just a shadow but an actual person, an old woman in a faded blue dress, dancing with her arms around nothing, like she was waltzing with an invisible partner. She was beautiful in a sad way, with her grey hair pinned up and pearl earrings that caught the light, but her face was wrong, too pale, too thin, and her eyes were completely black. When she saw me watching, she smiled and waved, beckoning me to come over, mouthing words I couldn't understand through the glass. I started having dreams about her house, walking through rooms that were exactly like mine but covered in dust and cobwebs, following the sound of music upstairs that creaked under my feet. In the dreams she was always waiting for me in that mirrored bedroom, still dancing, still smiling, asking me to dance with her. Just one dance, she'd been alone for so long. I started researching the house's history at the library, going through old newspapers on microfilm until my eyes burned from staring at the screen. Found an article from 1987 about Margaret Linson, 67 years old, found dead in her home after neighbors complained about a smell, had been dead for 3 months. The article said she'd been a widow, her husband died in 1984, and she'd become a recluse, never leaving the house. Neighbors would hear music at all hours of the night. They found her in the living room, dressed in her finest clothes like she was going to a party. The record player still spinning even though the power had been shut off weeks earlier. The house had been sold and resold 5 times since then, but no family ever lasted more than a few months. They all said the same thing, someone was already living there. I tried to ignore her after that, keeping my curtains closed tight, wearing headphones to bed. But the music got louder, started playing during the day too, and then she started appearing in other windows, not just the bedroom but the kitchen, the bathroom, even the small window in their garage. Always watching our house, always dancing. My little brother saw her too, came crying to my room one night saying the old lady next door was standing in our backyard, looking up at his window, still dancing in the moonlight. We both watched from his window as she danced across our lawn, her feet not quite touching the grass, her dress flowing around her like she was underwater. She danced all the way to our back door and then just stood there, swaying slightly, her hand raised like she was about to knock. But she never did, just stood there until sunrise. The next day, my mom found the back door wide open even though she'd locked it the night before, and there were wet footprints on the kitchen floor, the kind you'd make if you'd been dancing in the morning dew. Things escalated quickly after that. We'd find our furniture rearranged in the living room, pushed to the walls like someone was clearing a dance floor. The old jazz music would play from our own stereo, even when it was unplugged, and sometimes we'd all hear footsteps upstairs, the sound of high heels clicking across hardwood. My parents called the police, thinking someone was breaking in, but they found nothing, no signs of forced entry, no fingerprints, just those wet footprints that led nowhere. Then I started seeing other people in the house next door, shadowy figures watching from every window, all of them dancing, all of them beckoning. I researched more and found that Margaret Linson's house had been built on the site of an old dance hall that burned down in 1952. 17 people died, trapped inside during a Valentine's Day dance. The night I learned that, the music was so loud it shook our windows, and when I looked outside, the house next door was lit up like a ballroom, figures spinning past every window. I could see them clearly now, men in suits and women in gowns, all of them with those same black eyes, all of them looking at our house, waiting for something. Margaret appeared at my window, not next door but right outside my second-story bedroom window, floating there in her blue dress, tapping on the glass with one pale finger. "Just one dance," she whispered, her voice like old leaves rustling. "I've been practicing for so long, waiting for a partner. Just one dance and I'll leave you alone." I backed away from the window, but she followed, floating along the side of the house, appearing at every window I passed, her face pressed against the glass. My parents couldn't see her even when she was right there. They just saw me backing away from nothing, crying and pointing at empty air. That night she got inside, I don't know how, but I woke up to find her standing at the foot of my bed, her hand extended, that sad smile on her face. "Dance with me," she said, and the music started, filling my room even though I didn't have a stereo. "Just one dance and then you can rest. Everyone needs to rest eventually." I understood then what she meant. Dancing with her meant joining her, becoming like her. Another shadow in that house of endless dancing. I ran, pushed past her even though touching her felt like pushing through cobwebs and ice, ran to my parents' room and refused to leave. The next morning we packed everything we could fit in the car and left. My parents finally believed something was wrong when they saw the handprints on my bedroom window, on the inside of the glass. We stayed in a hotel while they looked for a new place, but I could still hear the music sometimes, faint and far away, calling me back. We moved across the country to Florida, as far from Portland as we could get, but I still dream about that house, about Margaret and her eternal dance. And sometimes, when I'm alone in my room at night, I hear jazz music from somewhere far away, and I know she's still there, still dancing, still waiting for someone to accept her invitation. The house is still empty. I check the real estate listings sometimes. It goes up for sale every few months but never sells. The photos show empty rooms, but I can see them in the shadows. All of them, Margaret and the 17 others, dancing in the corners of the frame, waiting for someone new to move in, someone who will finally dance with them. The substitute teacher. When I was 14, our regular English teacher, Mrs. Patterson, went on maternity leave, and the school brought in a substitute named Mr. Crane. He was tall and impossibly thin, like someone had stretched a normal person to be 7 feet tall without adding any extra mass, and his arms hung down past his knees when he stood. His face was long and pale with deep-set eyes that never seemed to blink, and when he smiled, which was often, his mouth opened too wide, showing too many teeth. He wore the same black suit every day, the kind that looked like it came from another era, with a high collar and buttons that seemed to be made of bone. On his first day, he wrote his name on the board in handwriting that looked like spider legs, and when he turned to face the class, his movement was all wrong, too fluid, like his bones bent in places they shouldn't. "Good morning, children," he said, and his voice was like two voices speaking at once, one high and one low, creating this weird harmony that made my teeth hurt. He never used the textbook. Instead, he'd tell us stories, horrible stories about children who didn't listen, who didn't do their homework, who fell asleep in class. The stories always ended the same way, with the children disappearing, being taken by something he called the collectors, who lived in the space between the walls of the school. He described them in detail, these things with backwards, bending legs and too many joints in their fingers, things that could fold themselves flat to fit through the smallest spaces. "They're always watching," he'd say, his eyes scanning the classroom, lingering on students who weren't paying attention, always waiting for the right moment to collect. The weird thing was that kids started disappearing from his class, not permanently, but for periods of time. They'd go to the bathroom and not come back for hours. When they returned, they were different, quieter, their eyes unfocused, and they all had the same story. They'd gotten lost somehow, even though they'd been going to this school for years. Tommy Morrison was the first one to tell me what really happened, pulled me aside after class with shaking hands, and told me not to leave the classroom alone. He said when he'd gone to the bathroom, Mr. Crane had followed him, not walking but sort of gliding down the hallway, his feet not quite touching the floor. Tommy had hidden in a stall, but Mr. Crane had stood outside, breathing heavily, whispering through the door about how the collectors were coming, how they were so hungry. Then the lights had gone out, and Tommy heard something moving in the walls, scratching and scuttling like giant insects, getting closer and closer. He'd curled up on the toilet seat, feet off the floor, holding his breath while things moved around him in the darkness, things that smelled like mold and old paper. When the lights came back on, hours had passed even though it felt like minutes, and Mr. Crane was gone, but there were marks on the bathroom stall door, like something with claws had been trying to get in. After Tommy told me this, I started noticing things about Mr. Crane, like how he never ate lunch, just sat in the classroom with the lights off, perfectly still. Sometimes I'd see him in impossible places, like on the roof of the school or standing in the parking lot at 3 in the morning when I'd wake up and look out my window. He started giving us special assignments, telling us to write about our fears, our nightmares, the things that scared us most, and he'd read them with this hungry expression. Sarah Chan wrote about being afraid of the dark, and the next day all the lights in her house stopped working. Her family had to stay in a hotel for a week while electricians tried to figure out what was wrong. Marcus wrote about drowning, and his family's pipes burst, flooding their entire house with black water that smelled like decay. I refused to write anything real, just made up some generic story about spiders, but Mr. Crane knew I was lying. I could see it in his eyes when he handed the paper back. "Disappointing," he said, his two-tone voice making the words sound like a threat. "The collectors prefer honest fear, it tastes better." That night I woke up to find him standing outside my bedroom window, his long face pressed against the glass, smiling that too-wide smile. He mouthed words I couldn't understand, then pointed up at my roof, and I heard footsteps above me, dozens of them, like an army of things scurrying across the shingles. I pulled my blanket over my head and prayed until morning, and when I finally looked, he was gone, but there were handprints on my window, on the outside, 3 stories up. The next day in class, he announced we were going on a special field trip, down to the old part of the school, the basement that had been closed off since the 1970s. The principal didn't know about it, he said with a wink. It would be our secret, a special lesson about the history of the building, about the things that lived in its bones. Half the class was excited, the other half, the ones who'd been disappearing and coming back changed, sat silent and pale, shaking their heads when no one was looking. I tried to fake being sick, but Mr. Crane saw right through it, put his cold hand on my forehead, and said my temperature was perfect, though I could feel ice spreading from where he touched me. He led us through a door I'd never noticed before, behind the janitor's closet, down stairs that were too narrow and seemed to go down much further than a basement should. The walls were different down there, older, made of stone that was wet and cold, and covered in writing that hurt to look at, symbols that seemed to move when you weren't watching directly. Mr. Crane's voice echoed strangely in the narrow corridor as he told us about the school's history, how it was built on something older, something that was here before the town existed. "The collectors have always been here," he said, running his two long fingers along the wall, "waiting for tribute, waiting for young minds full of fear and imagination." We reached a room at the end of the corridor, circular with a domed ceiling, and in the center was a hole, perfectly round and so dark it seemed to absorb the light from our flashlights. Mr. Crane gathered us around the hole, told us to look down, to see where the collectors lived, to understand what waited for children who didn't respect their teachers. Some kids looked, leaning over the edge, and I saw their faces change, their eyes going wide with terror before they stumbled back, unable to speak about what they'd seen. Jenny Parker looked too long, and something grabbed her, a hand made of shadow and bone reaching up from the hole, wrapping around her wrist with fingers like spider legs. She screamed, and we all grabbed her, pulling her back while Mr. Crane just watched with that horrible smile, like this was all part of his lesson plan. We got her free, but her wrist was marked, burned with symbols that matched the ones on the walls, and she wouldn't stop crying, saying she could hear them calling her. That's when I realized what Mr. Crane really was. Not a teacher, but something else, something that fed the collectors, that brought them fresh minds to consume. I grabbed Jenny and ran, and the others followed, all of us racing back through those narrow corridors while Mr. Crane's laughter echoed behind us, that two-toned sound bouncing off the walls. We burst out of the door and straight into the principal, who demanded to know what we were doing. But when we turned around, the door was gone, just a solid wall where it had been. Mr. Crane was already back in the classroom when we got there, acting like nothing had happened, teaching the rest of the class about semicolons like he hadn't just tried to feed us to monsters. Jenny's parents took her to the hospital, but the doctors couldn't explain the marks on her wrist, said they looked like burns but were cold to the touch, and they were spreading slowly up her arm. She never came back to school. Her family moved away within a week, but I heard she still has nightmares about the hole, about the things that live down there waiting. More kids started having accidents around Mr. Crane, falling down stairs that weren't there, getting lost in hallways that suddenly had too many turns, finding themselves in rooms that shouldn't exist. The principal finally started investigating when 7 kids ended up in the hospital with similar symptoms, all of them talking about the collectors, about the hole beneath the school. But when they went to fire Mr. Crane, he was already gone, his classroom empty except for a note written in that spidery handwriting. "The semester isn't over, I'll be back for finals." They hired a new substitute, but sometimes, when the lights flicker or the heating makes strange noises, we can hear him, that two-toned voice echoing through the vents. And kids still disappear sometimes, just for a few hours, and when they come back they all have the same story. They saw Mr. Crane in the walls, still teaching his lessons. The school tried to seal the basement, poured concrete over where we said the door had been. But it didn't matter, he didn't need doors, none of them did. Last week, Jenny called me from wherever her family moved to, her voice barely a whisper, saying the marks had spread to her shoulder now, forming words in that ancient language. She said she could understand them now. They were instructions, directions to the nearest hole, the nearest place where the collectors waited, and she was so tired of fighting the urge to go to them. The semester is almost over now. Finals are next week, and we're all terrified because Mr. Crane always keeps his promises, and he promised he'd be back. Some kids have already started seeing him, glimpses in windows, shadows in empty classrooms, that tall figure with 2 long arms waiting in the spaces between moments. I've been researching, trying to find out what he really is, and I found records of similar things happening at schools across the country. Always the same description, always the same name. Mr. Crane has been teaching for over 100 years, moving from school to school, bringing his special curriculum, feeding the collectors, and he never ages, never changes. Except his collection of students, the ones who look too long into the hole, the ones who carry the marks, they're all connected now, all part of something larger. And I think that's his real lesson, not about English or grammar, but about how some knowledge is dangerous, how some teachers don't want you to learn but to become part of the lesson. Finals are tomorrow and I'm not going. I don't care if I fail, because I know what his final exam really is. It's not about what we've learned, but what we're willing to sacrifice. But I can hear him calling through the walls, that two-toned voice saying my name, telling me I can't hide forever, that the collectors are patient but not infinitely so. And the worst part is, part of me wants to go, wants to see what's really down in that hole, wants to understand the lesson he's been trying to teach us all along. Because maybe that's the real horror, not that monsters exist, but that they're teachers, and eventually, whether we want to or not, we all have to graduate. The night shift. I got my first job when I was 15, working the night shift at a 24-hour gas station on the edge of town, one of those places that nobody goes to unless they're desperate or lost. My parents weren't happy about the hours, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., but the owner, Mr. Garrison, said he couldn't get anyone else to work those shifts and he'd pay me double. The station was old, probably built in the 60s, with flickering fluorescent lights that made everything look sick and green, and cameras that hadn't worked in years. Mr. Garrison trained me for exactly one shift, showing me how to work the register, restock the shelves, and most importantly, he showed me a notebook hidden under the counter. "Read this," he said, his hand shaking slightly as he passed it to me. "Read it and follow every rule, no matter how strange they seem, just follow them exactly." The notebook was filled with rules, handwritten by different people over the years, each one adding their own warnings and experiences in different colored ink. Rule 1. Between 2 and 3 a.m., don't look directly at anyone who comes in. Serve them with your eyes down. Take their money. Give them change. Don't speak unless spoken to. Rule 2. If someone asks for the special fuel, tell them pump 7 is out of order. Even though there is no pump 7, they'll understand and leave immediately. Rule 3. Never leave the booth after midnight. No matter what you see in the parking lot, no matter who seems to need help, stay inside and lock the door. Rule 4. If the phone rings 3 times and stops, then rings 3 times again, don't answer it. Unplug the phone until sunrise. Rule 5. Sometimes you'll hear knocking on the back door. It will sound like a child crying for help. Do not open the door, it's not a child. There were dozens more, each more unsettling than the last, and I thought it was some kind of hazing, like they were trying to scare the new kid. My first night alone was quiet until about 1:30 when an old pickup truck pulled up, the kind that looked like it was held together by rust and hope. The man who got out was normal looking enough, just a tired farmer in overalls, but something about the way he moved made my skin crawl, too smooth, like he was gliding. He came in and went straight to the chips, stood there for 10 minutes just staring at them, not moving, not even breathing that I could see, just standing perfectly still. Finally he grabbed a bag, brought it to the counter, and that's when I noticed his hands were wrong. The fingers were too long and had too many knuckles, bending in ways that made my stomach turn. I remembered the rules, kept my eyes down, took his money, a bill that felt wet and cold, gave him change, and he left without a word, his footsteps making no sound. When I looked at the security monitor, the parking lot was empty, no truck, no man, like he'd never been there at all, but the money in the register was real. At exactly 2 a.m., a woman came in wearing a wedding dress that looked like it had been buried and dug up, stained with dirt and something darker. She walked the aisles slowly, her dress dragging on the floor, leaving wet marks even though it hadn't rained in weeks, humming a song I recognized but couldn't place. I kept my eyes on the counter like the rules said, even when she stood right in front of me for 5 minutes, breathing heavily, that humming getting louder and more distorted. She finally left without buying anything, but as she passed the windows, I saw her reflection, and it wasn't a woman at all, but something else, something with too many teeth and eyes where there shouldn't be eyes. At 3:15, the phone rang 3 times and stopped, then rang 3 times again, and even though I knew the rule, I was curious, my hand hovering over the receiver. But then I heard the voice that came through even without me picking up, a child's voice saying, "We know you're there. We can see you through the windows. Why won't you help us?" I unplugged the phone like the notebook said, but I could still hear it, that voice coming from the dead receiver, getting angrier, describing things it was going to do to me if I didn't come outside. Around 4, I heard the knocking on the back door, soft at first, then louder, and yes, it sounded exactly like a child crying, begging to be let in, saying they were lost and scared. I went to look through the small window in the door and saw a little girl, maybe 7 years old, in pajamas, crying and shivering in the cold, looking so real, so genuinely terrified. But I remembered the rule and stayed put, watching through the window as she cried harder, and then her face started to change, melting and reshaping into something else. Her mouth opened wider than any human mouth should, rows of teeth going back into darkness, and she pressed her face against the window, leaving slime on the glass as she hissed at me. The thing that looked like a little girl stayed there until exactly 5 a.m., sometimes looking normal, sometimes showing its true face, alternating between begging and threatening. When the sun started to rise, it finally gave up, walking backwards into the darkness of the parking lot, its head turning 180 degrees to keep watching me as it left. I thought about quitting right then, but something in the notebook caught my eye, a note in red ink. If you quit, they follow you home. Finish your contract. 6 months. Then you're free. So I kept working, night after night, following the rules, seeing things that shouldn't exist, serving customers who weren't quite human, learning the rhythm of wrongness. There was the man who came in every Thursday at exactly 1:47 a.m., bought the same candy bar, paid with coins from 1943, and left through the wall instead of the door. The woman who would stand at pump 3 for hours, not pumping gas, just standing there with her hand on the nozzle, smiling at nothing, her eyes reflecting light like a cat's. The group of teenagers who came in one night, all of them moving in perfect synchronization, speaking in unison, buying exactly the same items, paying with identical bills with identical serial numbers. One night a man asked for the special fuel, and I told him pump 7 was out of order like the rules said, and he nodded, but then he leaned in close and whispered, "You're learning, but be careful, some of us remember faces." I started adding my own notes to the notebook, warnings for whoever came after me, like how the bathroom door sometimes opens to different places, or how the slushy machine occasionally fills with something that isn't slushy. Rule 37, my addition. If you see yourself on the security monitors, but you're not in that part of the store, don't go investigate. It's not you, and it doesn't like being discovered. Rule 38. The storage room key sometimes turns warm. When it does, wait an hour before using it. Something is using that room and doesn't want to be disturbed. The worst night was when I broke a rule, accidentally looked directly at a customer during the forbidden hours, made eye contact with something wearing a human face like a mask. It smiled at me, a smile that split its face in half, and said, "Now you're part of the game. Now you can really see us. Congratulations on your promotion." After that night, I saw them everywhere, not just at the station but in town during the day, mixed in with regular people, watching me, nodding when we made eye contact. They were teachers, police officers, doctors, all of them wearing human faces, all of them knowing that I knew what they really were, and enjoying my fear. Mr. Garrison came by one morning, looking exhausted, and asked how I was doing, if I was following the rules, if I'd seen anything unusual. I asked him what they were, these things that came at night, and he just shook his head, said some questions don't have answers, some things just are, and we just have to coexist. The station is a borderland, he said, a place where our world touches theirs, and someone has to mind the border, make sure the rules are followed, keep the peace. He told me every town has places like this, gas stations, all-night diners, empty motels, places that serve as neutral ground for things that shouldn't exist. And someone has to work these places, has to be the gatekeeper, the one who maintains the balance, who keeps them from spilling over into the normal world. My 6 months were almost up when the worst thing happened. A new customer came in, someone who didn't follow any of the patterns, didn't appear in any of the rules. She looked completely normal, a middle-aged woman in a cardigan, buying coffee and a magazine, chatting about the weather, everything perfectly ordinary except for one thing. She knew my name, my real name, not the fake one on my name tag, and she knew where I lived, where I went to school, my parents' names, everything. "You've been doing such a good job," she said, smiling warmly. "We've been watching. and we think you're ready for more responsibility, a permanent position." She left a business card on the counter, completely blank except for a phone number, and said, "Call us when you're ready to see how deep this really goes." I finished my 6 months, handed the notebook to the next kid, a 16-year-old who thought it was all a joke, and I wanted to warn him but knew he wouldn't believe me. The things still follow me. I see them everywhere now, in every shadow, in every reflection, always watching, always waiting for me to call that number. Some nights I'm tempted, curious about what they really are, what they want, what would happen if I became one of them, if I took that permanent position. But I remember the look in Mr. Garrison's eyes, the exhaustion, the fear, the weight of knowing too much, and I resist, hoping that eventually they'll lose interest. It's been 3 years now, and I still can't work normal jobs, can't be around people without wondering which ones are real, can't sleep without checking that my reflection is really mine. And sometimes, late at night, my phone rings 3 times and stops, then rings 3 times again, and I know they're still waiting for my answer. The family in the photographs. When I was 12, my grandmother died and left me her house, specifically to me, not my parents, which everyone thought was strange since I was just a kid. The will was very specific. The house had to remain in my name. I had to spend at least 1 night a week there once I turned 16, or it would be donated to the Historical Society. My parents thought it was weird but sweet. Grandma had always said I was special, that I could see things others couldn't, though nobody ever knew what she meant by that. The house was exactly as she'd left it, full of antique furniture and dusty books. But the strangest thing was the photographs, hundreds of them, covering every wall. They were all family photos, going back generations, black and white, sepia. Some so old the faces were barely visible, but something about them felt wrong. It took me weeks to realize what it was. In every single photograph, no matter how old, there was someone in the background who didn't belong, someone who appeared in every picture. Sometimes it was barely noticeable, just a face in a window, a shadow in a doorway, but once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. This person who'd been in my family's photos for over 100 years. They looked different in each photo, but something about them was always the same. The way they stood, the tilt of their head, and always they were looking directly at the camera. I asked my parents about it, but they couldn't see what I was talking about. To them, the photos were completely normal, just boring old family pictures. But I could see them clearly. This person who aged backwards through the photos, looking older in recent pictures and younger as you went back in time. I started cataloging them, organizing the photos chronologically, and that's when I noticed the pattern. The person appeared exactly every 7 years, in photos from 1894, 1901, 1908, and so on. The most recent photo was from 7 years ago, at my 5th birthday party, and there they were, standing in our backyard, visible through the kitchen window, watching the party. According to my calculations, they were due to appear again this year, and that thought terrified me more than anything else about the photographs. I found Grandma's journals in the attic, decades of careful notes about the family, about the house, and about what she called the Watcher who appeared in the photographs. She wrote that the Watcher had been with our family since the beginning, neither friend nor foe, just an observer, documenting our lives for reasons nobody understood. But every 7th year, the Watcher would choose one family member to collect, to take their place in the photographs, to become part of the static history while the Watcher became real. The chosen person would slowly fade from reality, first from recent photos, then from memories, until nobody remembered they'd ever existed except for whoever could see the Watcher. Grandma had been able to see them, and her grandmother before her, always the women in our family, always passing the knowledge down, always trying to protect the family from being collected. She'd developed rules over the years, ways to avoid being chosen, like never being photographed alone, always keeping moving during the 7th year, never looking directly at cameras. But sometimes it didn't work, and she had a list of family members who'd been collected, people I'd never heard of, uncles and aunts and cousins erased from history. I became obsessed with the photographs, studying them for hours, trying to understand the Watcher's criteria for choosing what made someone a target. Then I found the photograph that changed everything, hidden behind another frame, A picture of Grandma as a young woman standing next to someone who looked exactly like me. Not similar, not a family resemblance, but exactly like me, down to the small scar on my left eyebrow from when I fell off my bike. Except this photo was from 1952. On the back, in Grandma's handwriting, it said, "Elizabeth and her replacement, 7 years until the return. The cycle continues, I'm sorry." I didn't understand until I found more photos, all hidden, showing the same girl who looked like me at different ages, in different time periods, always with the same caption. The replacement. The truth was worse than I imagined. The Watcher didn't just collect people. They replaced them with copies. And I wasn't the first version of myself. I was the latest in a long line. Every 7th generation, the Watcher would take the original and leave a replacement. Someone who looked the same, had the same memories, but was fundamentally different, fundamentally wrong. I started noticing things about myself that didn't make sense. Memories that felt borrowed, skills I shouldn't have, knowledge of things that happened before I was born. When I looked in mirrors, sometimes my reflection would move a fraction of a second before I did, like it was leading rather than following. My parents started acting strange around me, not suspicious exactly, but careful, like they were subconsciously aware that something about me wasn't quite right. I found a letter from Grandma, sealed and addressed to me, hidden in a book about family. I found a letter from Grandma, sealed and addressed to me, hidden in a book about family genealogy, with instructions not to open it until you understand what you are. When I finally opened it, her words confirmed my worst fears. You are both the Watcher and the watched, the photographer and the photograph, neither fully human nor fully other. She explained that our family was cursed, or blessed, depending on how you looked at it, to be the keepers of the boundary between the static world of photographs and the living world of reality. Every 7th year, the Watcher would return to check on their collection, to make sure the replacements were maintaining the balance, keeping the secret, protecting both worlds from each other. But this year was different. This was year 343, 7 times 7 times 7, a perfect number, and the Watcher would come to make a final choice about our family's role. Either we would be released from our obligation, allowed to become fully human again, or we would be permanently collected, all of us, turned into photographs while our replacements took over our lives. The date was approaching, October 13th, exactly 7 years from my 5th birthday party, and I could feel something changing in the house, in the photographs. The Watcher was becoming clearer in the old photos, more defined, more real, and I was starting to see them in reflections, in windows, always standing just behind me. They looked like everyone and no one, constantly shifting features, but their eyes remained the same, ancient and patient, like they'd been watching since the beginning of time. I tried to prepare, following Grandma's rules, but also developing my own strategies, covering all the mirrors, destroying any recent photographs of myself, never standing still for more than a few minutes. My parents wanted to take family photos for our Christmas card, but I refused, made excuses, caused fights, anything to avoid being captured on film during this crucial time. Then I found the camera in the attic, an old box camera from the 1890s, with a note from Grandma. This is their camera, the original, the one that started it all. Maybe it can end it too. Inside the camera was a single glass plate, unexposed, waiting for one final photograph. And I knew instinctively that this was the key, the way to break the cycle. On October 13th, I waited in Grandma's house, surrounded by all the photographs, the camera ready, my hands shaking as midnight approached. At exactly midnight, the Watcher appeared, not gradually but all at once, standing in the living room like they'd always been there, smiling with a face that kept changing. "You understand now," they said, their voice like multiple people speaking in harmony. "You know what you are, what you've always been, what you will always be." They explained that they weren't the enemy, they were the guardian, protecting reality from the things that lived in photographs, the frozen moments that wanted to become real. Every family had one, a bloodline chosen to maintain the boundaries, to be the bridge between worlds, and ours had been chosen at the very beginning of photography itself. The replacements weren't copies, they were us, split between two worlds, part of us living in reality, part trapped in the photographs, and the watcher kept the balance. "But you're different," the watcher said, moving closer, their form solidifying into something almost human. "You can see both sides clearly. You could be the perfect guardian, or you could end it all." They gestured to the camera in my hands. "One photograph, that's all it would take. Capture me and I become static. Release your family from their obligation, but also release everything else." I understood then what Grandma had been trying to tell me. The photographs weren't prisons. They were cages, keeping things locked away that should never be free. All those family members who'd been collected were actually volunteers, choosing to become guards, watching from the photographs to make sure nothing escaped. But I was tired of being watched, tired of watching, tired of living split between worlds. So I raised the camera, aimed it at the watcher, who didn't move, didn't resist. "Choose wisely," they said. "Freedom isn't always free, and some prisons protect both the prisoners and the world outside." I almost took the picture, my finger on the shutter release. But then I saw them, in all the photographs around me, my family members, the collected ones, shaking their heads, pleading with their eyes. And behind them, in the backgrounds of the photos, I saw other things, darker things, pressing against the boundaries of their frozen worlds, waiting to be released. I lowered the camera, understanding finally that some burdens are also privileges, some curses are also responsibilities, and some families are chosen not for punishment but for trust. The watcher smiled, a real smile this time, and began to fade. "7 more years," they said. "Train your replacement well, the next choice will be theirs." After they left, I found a new photograph on the mantel, one that hadn't been there before, showing me standing in Grandma's living room, the camera in my hands, deciding. And in the background, barely visible through the window, was a young girl who looked exactly like I had at 5 years old, watching, waiting for her turn to understand. I'm 18 now, still spending one night a week in Grandma's house, studying the photographs, learning the history, preparing for the next visit. Sometimes I see the watcher in town, always in the background, always watching, and we nod to each other, two guardians acknowledging our shared duty. My parents still don't understand why I'm so obsessed with old photographs, why I refuse to be in pictures, why I spend so much time at Grandma's house. But they don't need to understand. They're safe because I understand, because I watch, because I keep the balance between the world that moves and the world that's frozen. And somewhere out there, a little girl is growing up, seeing things in photographs that others can't see, wondering why she looks exactly like that girl in the old pictures at Grandma's house. In 7 years, she'll be 12, the same age I was when Grandma died, and the cycle will continue, as it always has, as it always must, keeping the photographs still and the world moving. The school pool. Nobody went swimming at our high school after dark, not since what happened to the swim team back in 1997, though most people didn't know the real story. I was 15 when I joined the swim team, desperate to fit in at a new school, and Coach Warner said I had natural talent, that I moved through water like I was born for it. The pool was Olympic-sized, built in the 1960s with money from some wealthy donor who'd lost a child to drowning and wanted to make sure every kid in town learned to swim. During the day it was fine, just a normal pool with overly chlorinated water and ugly tile that hadn't been updated in decades. But at night, something changed. I first noticed it during late practice, how the water looked darker after sunset, thicker somehow, and how sounds echoed differently, like the pool was deeper than its marked 12 feet. The janitor, Mr. Torres, always waited until we were completely out before turning off the lights, standing by the door counting heads like he was making sure nobody got left behind. One night I asked him why he was so careful, and he just looked at me with tired eyes and said, "Water has a memory, and this pool remembers too much." I thought he was just being creepy, but then I started having the dreams where I was swimming in the school pool, but it went on forever. No walls, no bottom, just endless dark water. In the dreams there were others swimming with me, kids in old-fashioned swimsuits from different decades, all of them swimming in the same direction like they were trying to reach something. I'd wake up exhausted, my muscles sore like I'd actually been swimming all night, and sometimes I'd find my hair was damp even though I'd showered before bed. Coach Warner announced we'd be having a lock-in, an all-night practice session to prepare for the state championships. And despite the stories, 12 of us signed up. The lock-in started at 8 p.m. on a Friday, and at first it was fun, pizza and movies in the gym, then practice runs, time trials, everybody trying to beat their personal best. Around midnight, Coach went to his office to do paperwork, leaving us to do cool-down laps, and that's when Ashley Chan said she saw something moving under the diving board. We all looked, but the pool lights created weird shadows, making it hard to see clearly, though we all agreed something seemed off about the deep end. Tommy Reeves, always the show-off, said he'd swim down and check it out, dove in before anyone could stop him, his form perfect as always. He surfaced quickly, too quickly, his face pale and eyes wide, scrambling for the edge like something was chasing him, though we couldn't see anything in the water. "There's someone down there," he gasped, pulling himself out so fast he scraped his knee on the concrete. At the bottom, just standing there, looking up. We all laughed nervously, thinking he was trying to scare us, but Tommy wasn't laughing. He was shaking, genuinely terrified, wrapping himself in multiple towels. Sarah Martinez, braver than the rest of us, grabbed a pair of goggles and stuck her head underwater to look, but pulled back immediately, stumbling backwards. "The bottom isn't where it should be," she said, her voice strange. "It goes down too far, I can't see the end, and there are lights down there, like windows. That should have been when we left, when we got Coach and demanded to go home. But teenage pride is a powerful thing, and nobody wanted to be the first to admit they were scared. We decided to stay together, nobody swimming alone. But then the pool lights started flickering, going out one by one from the shallow end toward the deep end. In the growing darkness, the water began to glow faintly, a sick phosphorescent green that made everything look alien and wrong. Marcus pointed at the lane lines. They were moving on their own, undulating like snakes, creating patterns in the water that hurt to look at directly. Then we heard it, a voice calling from the water, young and desperate. "Help me, please, I've been down here so long. Please help me get out." It sounded like a kid, maybe 12 or 13, and the voice was coming from the deep end, from somewhere far below where the bottom should be. Ashley started crying, saying we needed to help them, but Tommy grabbed her arm. "That's not a person. People can't live underwater. Don't listen to it." The voice changed, became multiple voices, all children, all pleading. "We're so cold, we've been swimming for so long. Please let us rest. Please help us stop." I looked into the water and saw them. Dozens of kids swimming in place at different depths, some in modern swimsuits, others in styles from decades ago. Their eyes were white, completely white, and their skin had that wrinkled, waterlogged look, like they'd been submerged for far too long. One of them swam closer to the surface, close enough that I could see her face clearly, and I recognized her from the trophy case photos. Diana Morrison, state champion, 1997. She opened her mouth like she was trying to speak, but only water came out, endless water, more than her lungs could possibly hold. Coach Warner's voice suddenly boomed over the intercom. "Everyone out of the pool area now. Don't look at the water, don't listen to them, just get out." We ran for the doors, but they were locked. The emergency exits too. All of them sealed like the building itself was trying to keep us inside. The water started rising, impossible since it was a sunken pool, but it crept over the edges, spreading across the deck, reaching for our feet. Where the water touched the floor, it left marks, oxidation patterns that looked like hands, hundreds of hands, pulling themselves forward. Mr. Torres appeared with his keys, his face grim, counting us as he unlocked the door. 9, 10, 11. Where's the 12th? Where's the 12th? We looked around and realized Marcus was gone. His towel left by the pool's edge, wet footprints leading back toward the water, then just stopping. Through the observation window, we could see him in the pool, swimming with the others, his eyes already turning white, moving in that same repetitive pattern. Coach Warner was on the phone with someone, arguing. "It's happening again. You said the new filtration system would stop it. You said the blessing would hold." Mr. Torres grabbed me specifically, looked me in the eyes. "You have the sight, don't you? You can see them clearly. You need to forget what you saw. Never speak of it. never swim at night again. They closed the pool for a week, said it was for maintenance, and when it reopened, Marcus was gone, transferred to another school his parents said, but his car was still in the parking lot. I quit the swim team, couldn't stand being near the water, especially after I learned the truth from old newspaper archives in the library. The pool was built on the site of an old quarry that had flooded in the 1920s. 12 children drowned during a summer camp swimming lesson when the bottom collapsed. Every few decades, the pool collected swimmers, always during night events, always taking them down to whatever was really beneath that false bottom. The school knew, had always known, but kept it open because closing it would mean acknowledging what happened, admitting that some places are too hungry to ever be satisfied. I saw Marcus once more, 3 months later, standing outside my bedroom window at 3 a.m., dripping wet despite the fact that it hadn't rained in weeks. He didn't say anything, just stood there, water pooling at his feet, his white eyes reflecting the streetlight. Then he turned and walked away, leaving wet footprints that led nowhere. The pool is still open, still hosting swim meets, still taking students for late-night practices, and Coach Warner is still there, older now, grayer, counting heads more carefully. Sometimes I drive by the school at night and see the pool lights on, see shadows moving in the windows, and I wonder how many swimmers are down there now, trapped in those infinite depths. Last week, my younger sister came home excited because she'd made the swim team, said they had a lock-in plan for next month, a tradition, she said, for team bonding. I begged my parents not to let her go, tried to explain about the pool, about what lived beneath it, but they thought I was having some kind of breakdown. So now I watch her practice during the day, count the team members, memorize their faces, hoping that when the lock-in comes, they'll all come back out. But I know they won't. The pool is hungry. It's been 4 years since it last fed, and the water remembers, just like Mr. Torres said. It remembers and it waits. And sometimes, late at night, I still dream of swimming in that endless dark water, following the others down, 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 to where the windows glow beneath the surface. The Midnight Visitor. My name is Sarah, and what I'm about to tell you happened just 2 months ago. I'm still trying to process it all, but I need to share this because maybe someone else has experienced something similar. I live alone in a small apartment on the 3rd floor of an old building. It's not fancy, but it's mine, and I've always felt safe there. The building has maybe 12 units, and most of my neighbors are elderly people who keep to themselves. Mrs. Chen next door sometimes brings me soup, and Mr. Rodriguez downstairs always says hello when we pass in the hallway. Everything was normal until that Tuesday night in October. I work late shifts at the hospital, so I usually get home around midnight. I'm used to the building being quiet at that hour. Everyone's asleep, the hallways are dimly lit, and you can hear every small sound echo through the old walls. That night, I was climbing the stairs to my floor when I heard footsteps above me. Not unusual, really. Sometimes people have trouble sleeping or need to use the bathroom. But these footsteps were different. They were slow, deliberate, like someone was pacing back and forth in the hallway. I reached my floor and saw him. A man I'd never seen before was standing at the far end of the hallway, near the window. He was tall, wearing dark clothes, and he had his back to me. He wasn't moving anymore, just standing there perfectly still. I thought maybe he was a new tenant or visiting someone. I pulled out my keys quietly, not wanting to disturb him, and unlocked my door. But as I pushed it open, I heard him speak. Sarah. I froze. He had said my name, but he hadn't turned around. He was still facing the window, his back to me. I quickly stepped inside and locked my door behind me. My heart was racing. How did he know my name? I'd never seen him before in my life. I looked through my peephole, but the hallway was empty now. The next morning, I asked Mrs. Chen if she'd seen a strange man in the building. She looked confused and said no, she hadn't seen anyone new. I asked Mr. Rodriguez the same thing when I saw him getting his mail. Same answer. I tried to convince myself it was nothing. Maybe he was visiting someone and they'd mentioned my name. Maybe I'd misheard him. But 3 nights later, it happened again. I was coming home from work, same time as always. As I climbed the stairs, I heard those same slow footsteps above me. This time, when I reached my floor, he was standing right outside my door. Same man, same dark clothes. But this time, he was facing me. I couldn't see his face clearly because the hallway light was dim, but I could tell he was looking directly at me. He didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there watching me. I was terrified, but I managed to speak. "Excuse me, can I help you?" He tilted his head slightly, like he was considering my question. Then he said, "You work late." It wasn't a question. It was a statement. Like he'd been watching me, learning my schedule. I fumbled with my keys, trying to get my door open as quickly as possible. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the lock. When I finally got inside, I immediately called the police. The officer who came was nice enough, but there wasn't much he could do. The man was gone by the time the police arrived, and I couldn't give them much of a description. The hallway camera had been broken for months, and the landlord kept saying he'd fix it, but never did. The officer suggested I vary my schedule if possible, and maybe ask a friend to walk me to my door. He also gave me his card and told me to call immediately if I saw the man again. I started staying at my sister's house for a few nights, but I couldn't do that forever. I had to come home eventually. When I did, I noticed small things that seemed off. My doormat was slightly crooked. The little plant I kept outside my door had been moved. Nothing major, nothing I could prove, but enough to make me feel like someone had been there. Then the notes started. The first one was slipped under my door. Just a piece of white paper with my name written on it in black ink. Nothing else, just Sarah, in neat handwriting. I called the police again, but they said there was nothing threatening about someone writing my name on paper. They were right, I suppose, but it felt threatening to me. The second note came a week later. This one said, "You look tired." The third one said, "You should get more sleep." Each note was in the same neat handwriting, always just slipped under my door while I was at work or asleep. I started checking my peephole obsessively before opening my door. I bought new locks, better locks. I even bought a small security camera to point down the hallway, but someone kept moving it or turning it to face the wall. The notes kept coming. "You changed your schedule. New locks won't help. I know when you're home." I was barely sleeping. Every sound in the building made me jump. I couldn't concentrate at work. My sister begged me to move in with her, but I couldn't afford to break my lease. And besides, why should I have to run from my own home? Then came the night that changed everything. I was lying in bed, probably around 2 in the morning, when I heard my doorknob turning. Slowly, carefully, like someone was testing to see if it was locked. I held my breath and listened. The sound stopped, then started again. Someone was definitely trying to get into my apartment. I grabbed my phone and called 911, whispering as quietly as I could. While I was on the phone with the dispatcher, I heard something that made my blood run cold. Humming. Someone on the other side of my door was humming a lullaby. The same lullaby my grandmother used to sing to me when I was little. A song I hadn't heard in years. A song that no stranger should know. The police arrived within minutes, but once again, no one was there. This time, though, they found something. Scratches around my door lock, like someone had been trying to pick it. The officer who responded was the same one from before. He looked concerned this time, more willing to take me seriously. He suggested I file for a restraining order, but how could I do that when I didn't even know who this person was? He also suggested I install a better security system and maybe consider moving if possible. That weekend, my sister and I started looking for a new apartment. I hated giving up my home, but I couldn't live in fear anymore. While we were out apartment hunting on Sunday afternoon, my neighbor Mrs. Chan called me. She sounded shaken up. "Sarah, honey," she said, "there's a man here asking about you. He says he's your cousin, but something doesn't feel right about him." I told her I don't have any cousins and asked her to call the police. She said she already had, and they were on their way. When I got back to the building, there were police cars outside. The officers told me that a man had been going door to door, asking my neighbors questions about me, what time I came home, whether I lived alone, if I had a boyfriend. Mrs. Chen had been smart enough to get suspicious and call for help. When the police arrived, they found him trying to get into the building's basement, where he'd apparently been setting up some kind of camp. Blankets, food, notebooks filled with observations about me and my routine. They arrested him, finally. His name was David Lynch, and he'd been evicted from his apartment 2 buildings over about a month earlier. Somehow, he'd become obsessed with me, though we'd never met. He'd been living in various basements and stairwells in the neighborhood, watching me, learning my schedule, planning. I don't know what he was planning, and I don't want to know. The police found dozens of notes he'd written but never delivered, each one more disturbing than the last. They also found photos he'd taken of me walking to and from work. He's in jail now, waiting for trial. I did move to a new apartment, in a building with better security and cameras that actually work. I also changed jobs, started seeing a therapist, and learned some basic self-defense. But I still check my locks 3 times before bed. I still look over my shoulder when I'm walking alone. And sometimes, late at night, I swear I can still hear that humming. The wrong house. Let me start by saying I'm not the kind of person who believes in ghosts or supernatural stuff. I'm a pretty logical guy. I work in IT, I troubleshoot problems for a living, and there's usually a reasonable explanation for everything. But what happened to my family last summer still doesn't make sense to me. My wife Jennifer and I have 2 young kids, Emma who's 8 and Tyler who's 6. We'd been saving up for years to take them on a real vacation, somewhere special they'd remember. We decided on a beach house rental in North Carolina. Jennifer found this place online that looked perfect. 3 bedrooms, right on the beach, affordable for a week during the off-season. The photos showed a beautiful blue house with white trim, a big deck overlooking the ocean, and a private walkway down to the sand. The reviews were all positive. People talked about how peaceful it was, how clean, how perfect for families. We booked it immediately. The drive down took about 6 hours with stops, and the kids were getting restless by the time we reached the coastal area. It was late afternoon, around 5 o'clock, when we started looking for our rental. The address led us down a narrow road lined with beach houses on one side and dunes on the other. We were looking for number 247, and we found it easily enough. But something was wrong immediately. The house we pulled up to was nothing like the photos. It was blue, yes, but the paint was peeling and faded. The white trim was grey with mildew. The deck was there, but half the boards looked rotten, and there was no furniture on it like there had been in the pictures. "This can't be right," Jennifer said, checking the confirmation email on her phone. I looked at the house number again. 247, just like our reservation said. We sat in the car for a few minutes, trying to figure out what to do. The kids were tired and hungry, and it was getting late. Maybe the photos were just old, Or maybe they'd been edited to look better than reality. Jennifer called the number we'd been given for the rental company, but it went straight to voicemail. "Let's just check it out," I said. "Maybe it's nicer inside." We grabbed our suitcases and walked up to the front door. There was a lockbox hanging on the handle, just like we'd been told. I punched in the code they'd given us, and it opened. Inside, the key was waiting. The house was dim and stuffy, like it had been closed up for a long time. I found the light switches and started turning on lamps. The living room was furnished, but everything looked old and worn. The couch had stains on it, the coffee table was scratched up, and there was a musty smell throughout the house. "Daddy, this place is yucky," Emma said, wrinkling her nose. She wasn't wrong, but what choice did we have? We'd paid for the week in advance, and it was too late to find somewhere else. "It's just a little dusty," Jennifer said, though I could tell she was disappointed too. "We'll open some windows and air it out." We spent the next hour getting settled. The bedrooms were in better shape than the living room, though the sheets on all the beds looked like they needed washing. The kitchen was functional but dated, with a refrigerator that made weird noises and a stove with only 2 working burners. By the time we got everything unpacked and had dinner at a nearby restaurant, it was dark. The kids were exhausted, and honestly, so were we. We put Emma and Tyler to bed in one of the smaller bedrooms and settled into what was supposed to be the master bedroom. The bed was comfortable enough, and the sound of the ocean outside was actually really nice. I was almost asleep when I heard footsteps upstairs. I opened my eyes and listened. The footsteps were slow and heavy, like someone walking around directly above our bedroom. "Jennifer," I whispered, "do you hear that?" She was already awake. "Yeah, what is that?" The footsteps continued for a few more minutes, then stopped. "Maybe it's just the house settling," I said, though I didn't really believe it. The sounds had been too regular, too purposeful. We waited, listening, but didn't hear anything else. Eventually, we fell asleep. The next morning, I went upstairs to investigate. There was an attic space above the second floor, accessible through a small door in the hallway ceiling. I got a chair and climbed up to take a look. The attic was empty except for some old boxes and what looked like decades worth of dust. The floorboards were solid, no loose planks that might creak or shift in the wind. I couldn't explain the footsteps we'd heard. That second night, it happened again. Same slow, heavy walking, same location directly above our bedroom. This time, Jennifer got up and went to check on the kids, thinking maybe one of them was sleepwalking. But Emma and Tyler were both sound asleep in their bed. "This is weird," Jennifer said when she came back. "Should we call the rental company again?" We tried, but still got voicemail. And honestly, what were we going to say? That we heard footsteps in an empty attic? The third night, things got worse. The footsteps started earlier, around 10 o'clock, right after we'd put the kids to bed. But this time, they didn't stop after a few minutes. They went on for hours, back and forth, like someone pacing. Emma came into our room around midnight, scared and unable to sleep. "Mommy, there's someone walking around up there," she said. "It's just the house making noise, sweetie," Jennifer told her, but I could hear the uncertainty in her voice. Emma climbed into bed with us, and eventually Tyler joined us too. All 4 of us crammed into one bed, listening to those endless footsteps above our heads. Around 3 in the morning, the walking finally stopped. But then we heard something else. Scraping, like someone dragging something heavy across the floor. That was it for me. I got up, grabbed a flashlight, and went upstairs. I was going to check that attic again, even if it meant waking up the whole house. I pulled down the attic door and climbed up with my flashlight. The space looked exactly the same as before. Dusty, empty, undisturbed. But as I was climbing back down, I noticed something I'd missed before. Footprints in the dust. Fresh footprints, much clearer than they should have been if they'd been there for months or years. And they were huge. Size 13 or 14 at least. Much bigger than my size 10 feet. I called Jennifer up to see them. She took one look and said, "We're leaving. Right now." "It's 3 in the morning," I said. "I don't care. We're not spending another night in this house." She was right. Something was seriously wrong, and we had our kids to think about. We packed up quickly and quietly, loaded everything into the car, and drove away. We found a hotel about 20 minutes down the coast and checked in for the rest of the week. The next morning, I called the rental company again. This time, someone actually answered. I told them about the footsteps, the scraping sounds, and the footprints in the attic. The woman on the phone was quiet for a long time. Finally, she said, "I think there's been a mistake." "What kind of mistake? Can you give me the address where you stayed?" I told her 247 Ocean Drive. Another long pause. "Sir, we don't have a property at that address. Our rental is at 274 Ocean Drive." My heart sank. "What do you mean? You stayed at the wrong house. 247 Ocean Drive. That property has been abandoned for years. The owner died about 5 years ago, and the family hasn't been able to sell it. No one's supposed to be staying there." I felt sick. "But there was a lockbox. There was a key." "I don't know about that, sir, but I can guarantee that house isn't one of our rentals. We'd somehow stayed 3 nights in an abandoned house. A house where someone had apparently been living, or at least visiting regularly, judging by those fresh footprints. The rental company gave us our money back and helped us book a different place for the rest of the week. Our actual vacation turned out to be wonderful, but we couldn't stop thinking about those 3 nights in the wrong house. I did some research when we got home. The house at 247 Ocean Drive had indeed been abandoned since the owner died. The family had tried to sell it several times, but something always went wrong. Potential buyers would back out, inspections would reveal mysterious problems, deals would fall through at the last minute. I also found some old newspaper articles about break-ins and vandalism at the property. Apparently, homeless people and squatters had been using it as a temporary shelter for years. That explained the footprints, I suppose. We'd probably shared the house with someone who had no idea we were there. Someone who was staying in the attic during the day and walking around at night. But it doesn't explain the lockbox with the key. It doesn't explain how the address mix-up happened. And it doesn't explain why, when I drove by the house on our way out of town, I saw a figure standing in one of the upstairs windows, watching us leave. The night shift. I used to work the night shift at a small medical clinic in downtown Portland. It wasn't a big hospital, just a place where people could come for minor emergencies and urgent care when their regular doctors weren't available. Most nights were pretty quiet. We'd see a few patients with fevers, minor injuries, maybe someone having an anxiety attack. Nothing too dramatic. I liked working nights because it paid better, and I'm naturally a night owl anyway. The clinic was staffed with just me, one doctor, and a security guard named Marcus, who mostly sat at the front desk and made sure no one caused trouble. This was about 3 years ago, and I'd been working there for maybe 6 months when things started getting weird. It began with patients asking about a doctor who didn't work there. The first time it happened, a woman came in around 2 in the morning with a bad cut on her hand. She'd been washing dishes and grabbed a broken glass the wrong way. Nothing too serious, but it needed stitches. While I was getting her paperwork started, she asked, "Is Dr. Morrison working tonight?" I told her we didn't have a Dr. Morrison on staff. Our night doctor was Dr. Patel, and he was the only physician in the building. She looked confused. "But I was here last week, and Dr. Morrison took care of me. Tall man, grey hair, very kind. I checked our computer system for any record of her visit. There was nothing. No appointment, no record of treatment, nothing." "Maybe you're thinking of a different clinic?" I suggested. She seemed embarrassed and said maybe she was confused. Dr. Patel took care of her cut, and she left without mentioning Dr. Morrison again. I didn't think much about it until it happened again 2 weeks later. This time, it was an elderly man who came in with chest pains. False alarm, thankfully, just indigestion from eating too much spicy food. But while we were monitoring him, he also asked about Dr. Morrison. "He was so helpful when I was here before," the man said. "I was hoping to see him again. Same story. Tall, grey-haired, very kind. And again, I could find no record of his previous visit in our system. Dr. Patel and I talked about it during a slow period that night. Maybe there's another clinic nearby with a Dr. Morrison," he suggested. "People get confused about where they've been, especially elderly patients." That made sense, so I looked it up. There were several medical facilities in the area, but none of them had a Dr. Morrison on staff either. Over the next few weeks, it kept happening. Different patients, but always the same story. They'd been treated by Dr. Morrison sometime recently, but we had no record of their visits, and there was no such doctor working anywhere in the area. Marcus, our security guard, started joking that we had a ghost doctor. "Maybe he only works the really late shift," he'd say. It was funny until the night I saw him myself. It was around 4 in the morning, probably the quietest hour of the night shift. We hadn't seen a patient in over 2 hours, and I was catching up on paperwork at the front desk while Marcus made his rounds through the building. I looked up from my computer and saw a man walking down the hallway toward the examination rooms. He was tall with grey hair, wearing a white coat like our doctors wore. I assumed it was Dr. Patel, maybe checking supplies or equipment for the next day. But then I remembered that Dr. Patel was short with black hair. I got up to see who this person was, but when I reached the hallway, it was empty. All the examination room doors were closed, and the lights were off. "Dr. Patel?" I called out. "What?" His voice came from the break room behind me. I turned around, and there he was, sitting at the small table with a cup of coffee, looking at me with confusion. "Did you just walk down the hallway?" I asked. "No, I've been in here for the past 10 minutes. "Why?" I told him what I'd seen. He looked concerned, but didn't seem to think it was anything supernatural. "Maybe someone got lost and wandered back there," he said. "Did you check with Marcus?" I found Marcus finishing his rounds near the back exit. He hadn't seen anyone come into the building, and he'd been watching the front desk the whole time I was away from it. "All the doors are locked except the main entrance," he said, "and I would have seen anyone who came through there." We did a thorough search of the building, checking every room, every closet, even the supply areas. We found nothing and no one. I was starting to understand why patients were asking about Dr. Morrison. The next few weeks were relatively normal, though I found myself looking over my shoulder more often during the quiet hours. I didn't see the grey-haired man again, but patients continued asking about Dr. Morrison. Then came the night that really scared me. It was a busy shift for once. We'd had a steady stream of patients all evening, and I was feeling pretty overwhelmed. Dr. Patel was with a patient who'd come in with severe stomach pain, and Marcus was dealing with a drunk guy who kept trying to leave against medical advice. Around 3 in the morning, a young woman came in. She was probably in her early 20s, very pale, and clearly in distress. "I need to see Dr. Morrison," she said. "He told me to come back if I didn't feel better." I started to explain that we didn't have a Dr. Morrison, but she interrupted me. "Please," he said, "it was important. He's expecting me." She looked so worried and frightened that I didn't want to argue with her. I told her to have a seat and that I'd see what I could do. I went to find Dr. Patel, but he was still busy with the stomach pain patient. I decided to take the young woman's information and explain the situation when the doctor became available. When I came back to the waiting area, she was gone. "Did you see where the young woman went?" I asked Marcus. "What young woman?" "The one who was just sitting right here. Pale skin, dark hair, maybe 22 years old." Marcus shook his head. "I haven't seen anyone like that. Are you feeling okay?" I was starting to question my own sanity, but I was sure I'd just been talking to her. I even checked the sign-in sheet, and there was her name, Lisa Chen. But when I looked around the waiting area, there was no trace that anyone had been there. The chair she'd been sitting in wasn't even warm. I spent the rest of my shift feeling unsettled and confused. When Dr. Patel finally had a free moment, I told him about the young woman who'd disappeared. "Are you sure you weren't dreaming?" he asked. "You've been working a lot of double shifts lately." Maybe he was right. Maybe I was just exhausted and imagining things. But the next morning, when I got home and was trying to sleep, I couldn't stop thinking about her. Something about the way she'd looked, the urgency in her voice when she asked for Dr. Morrison. I decided to do some research. I searched online for Lisa Chen and found several social media profiles, but none of them seemed to match the young woman I'd seen. Then I tried searching for Lisa Chen along with terms like medical emergency and Portland Clinic. What I found made my blood run cold. There was a newspaper article from 8 months earlier about a young woman named Lisa Chen who had died in a car accident. She'd been on her way to a medical appointment, according to the article. She was 23 years old. The photo in the article showed the same young woman I'd seen in our waiting room. But that wasn't the strangest part. The article mentioned that Lisa had been receiving treatment for a rare condition from a Dr. Richard Morrison, who had recently retired from his practice at Portland General Hospital. I looked up Dr. Morrison and found an obituary from 2 years ago. He died of a heart attack at age 68. The obituary described him as a tall, distinguished man with grey hair who was beloved by his patients for his kindness and dedication. I sat there staring at my computer screen, trying to make sense of what I'd learned. A dead patient was asking for a dead doctor at our clinic, where neither of them had ever been when they were alive. I didn't go back to work for 3 days. I called in sick and spent the time trying to figure out a rational explanation for everything that had happened. Maybe I'd seen the obituaries before, and my subconscious had created the whole scenario. Maybe the patients asking about Dr. Morrison were just confused and had gotten his name from old medical records. Maybe I was having some kind of breakdown from working too many night shifts. But when I finally returned to work, Marcus had news for me. "You're not going to believe this," he said. "I found out about your Dr. Morrison." He'd done some research of his own and discovered that Portland General Hospital had demolished an old wing 2 years ago to make room for a new parking garage. That wing had housed the offices of several retired doctors, including Dr. Morrison. "Here's the weird part," Marcus continued. "The construction crew found a bunch of old medical files that had been left behind. Guess whose name was in those files?" He showed me a photo on his phone. It was a list of patient names that had been salvaged from the demolition. Lisa Chen was right there at the top. The crew donated all the files to a medical records company for proper disposal, Marcus said. But some of the patients were contacted to make sure they had copies of their medical history. So Lisa Chen might have been contacted? I asked. That's what I'm thinking. Maybe she was coming to different clinics, trying to get information about her old treatment with Dr. Morrison. Maybe that's why all these patients keep asking about him. It was a reasonable explanation, except for one problem. Lisa Chan had been dead for 8 months when I saw her in our waiting room. I never told Marcus about that part. I never told anyone. I quit the night shift job a few weeks later and found work at a different clinic that only operated during regular daytime hours. I told everyone it was because I wanted a more normal schedule, which was partly true. But the real reason was that I couldn't handle seeing any more patients who shouldn't exist, asking for doctors who couldn't help them. Sometimes I wonder if Dr. Morrison is still making rounds somewhere, taking care of patients who need him. And sometimes I wonder if Lisa Chen ever found him. I hope she did. The shadow in the basement. I need to tell you what happened to me when I was 13 years old. I'm sharing this because I know there are others out there who've seen what I've seen. And maybe, just maybe, they need to know they're not alone. We lived in an old house at the edge of town. The kind of house that had been there for over 100 years. My parents bought it cheap because nobody else wanted it. The basement was the worst part. It was dark and damp, and it always smelled like something had died down there. My dad kept his tools down there, and sometimes I had to go get them for him. I hated every second of it. The stairs creaked with every step. The single light bulb barely lit up the space, and there were corners where the darkness seemed thicker somehow. One Saturday afternoon, my dad asked me to get his hammer from the basement. I remember standing at the top of those stairs for a full minute, just staring down into that darkness. Finally, I flicked on the light switch and headed down. The hammer was on his workbench near the back wall. I grabbed it quickly and turned to leave. That's when I saw it. In the corner where the light didn't quite reach. Something moved. Not like a mouse or a bug. Something bigger. Something that shouldn't have been there. I froze completely. My hand gripped the hammer so tight my knuckles went white. The thing in the corner shifted again, and I could make out a shape. It looked like a person, but the proportions were all wrong. Too tall, too thin, arms that hung down past where knees should be. I wanted to scream, but nothing came out. The thing took a step forward, just one step, into the light. Its face was pale and stretched, like someone had pulled putty and shaped it into something almost human. The eyes were just black holes. No whites, no color, just empty black spaces where eyes should be. It tilted its head at me, like a dog hearing a strange sound. Then it smiled. Oh God, that smile. Too many teeth. Way too many teeth. I ran. I've never run so fast in my life. Up the stairs. Through the door. Slammed it behind me. My dad found me in the kitchen gasping for air. "Where's my hammer?" he asked. I realized I'd dropped it down there. There was no way I was going back. I told him I felt sick and ran to my room. That night I barely slept. Every sound made me jump. Every shadow looked like that thing from the basement. The next morning my dad went down to get his hammer. He came back up looking confused. "Did you move my stuff around down there?" he asked. I shook my head. Well, someone did. Everything's been shifted, and there are these weird marks on the wall. My blood went cold. I never told him what I saw. He wouldn't have believed me anyway. But after that day, I never went into that basement alone again. And sometimes, late at night, I could hear things moving down there. Scratching sounds. Footsteps that were too heavy and too slow. We moved out 3 months later. My parents said it was for Dad's new job. But I knew the truth. They had started hearing the sounds too. The thing at the window. When I turned 14, I thought I was too old to be scared of monsters. I was wrong. So very wrong. It started during winter break. My parents both worked late, and my older sister was always out with her boyfriend. That meant I spent most evenings alone in our apartment. I didn't mind it usually. I'd play video games or watch TV until they got home. Our apartment was on the 3rd floor of an old building. My bedroom window faced the fire escape. I always kept the curtains closed at night. Something about that black metal structure outside made me uneasy. One Tuesday night, I was doing homework at my desk. It was around 8:30 and getting dark outside. I heard a sound. Tap, 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 like someone knocking on glass. I looked up at my window. The curtains were closed, but I could see a shadow through them. Someone was on the fire escape. My first thought was that it was a burglar. I grabbed my phone ready to call 911, but then the tapping came again. Tap, tap, tap. Slow and deliberate. Not like someone trying to break in. More like someone trying to get my attention. I crept closer to the window. My hand shook as I reached for the curtain. Part of me knew I shouldn't look, but I had to know what was out there. I pulled the curtain back just an inch. What I saw made no sense. There was someone on the fire escape, but they were facing away from my window, just standing there, perfectly still, wearing what looked like a hospital gown. Their skin was so pale it almost glowed in the darkness. Then slowly, so slowly, they started to turn around. I let the curtain fall back. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might explode. I backed away from the window. Tap, tap, tap. This time it was louder, more insistent. I ran to my bedroom door and locked it. Then I called my mom. "There's someone on the fire escape," I whispered into the phone. "What?" "Call the police," she said. "I can't. I'm too scared. Please come home." She said she was on her way. For 20 minutes I sat on my bed staring at that window. The tapping had stopped, but I could still see the shadow through the curtains. It hadn't moved. When my mom got home, she called the building manager. He went out to check the fire escape. Nobody was there, but he found something weird. There were wet footprints on the metal, like someone with bare feet had been standing there, but it hadn't rained in weeks. My mom wanted to call the police, but the manager said there was no point. Whoever it was had already left. That night my mom slept in my room with me. We kept the curtains closed. But around 3 in the morning we both woke up. Tap, tap, tap. My mom grabbed the baseball bat we kept by the door. She yanked open the curtains. Nothing. Nobody there. But on the window glass there were handprints. On the outside of the window. But the weird thing was they were too high up. Like whoever made them had been 7 feet tall. We stayed in a hotel the rest of the week. When we came back, my dad had installed new locks and security cameras. The cameras never caught anything, but sometimes I still heard that tapping. Always at night. Always 3 taps. And sometimes in the morning we'd find those handprints on the glass. Too high up. Too big. With too many fingers. We moved out as soon as our lease was up. But even now in our new place, I sometimes wake up at night, and I listen for that sound. Tap, tap, tap. The stranger on the trail. The summer I turned 15, I got a job at a day camp. It was perfect for me. Spending time outdoors with kids and getting paid for it. The camp was located in a state park about 5 miles from town. I usually got a ride from one of the other counselors. But one Friday in July, everyone had left early. I wasn't worried though. There was a hiking trail that cut through the woods and came out near my neighborhood. It was only about 3 miles if you took the shortcut. I'd walked it plenty of times before. I finished cleaning up around 4:30 and started down the trail. The sun was still high and the woods were beautiful. Birds singing, squirrels running through the trees. Just a perfect summer afternoon. About a mile in the trail split. The main path went left and took the long way around the lake. The shortcut went right through a section of older forest. The trees were bigger there and grew closer together. It was darker even in the afternoon, but it saved me at least 45 minutes of walking. I took the shortcut. At first everything was fine. The path was clear and well marked. I was making good time. Then I noticed how quiet it had gotten. No birds, no squirrels, no insects even. Just the sound of my own footsteps on the dirt path. That's when I saw him. About 50 yards ahead, there was a man standing in the middle of the trail. He wasn't moving, just standing there facing my direction. I slowed down. Something felt wrong. Hikers usually nod or wave when they pass each other. This guy was just standing there, watching me. As I got closer, I could see him better. He was wearing regular clothes, jeans and a dirty white t-shirt, but his feet were bare. Who hikes barefoot? When I was about 20 yards away, I called out, "Hi there." Just passing through. He didn't respond, didn't move, just kept staring. I could see his face now. He was smiling, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was too wide. And his eyes were completely focused on me, like a cat watching a mouse. I stopped walking. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to turn around, but that would mean turning my back on him. So I stepped off the trail instead. I'd go around him through the trees. The moment I left the path, he moved. Fast. So much faster than a person should be able to move. He was at the spot where I'd stepped off in seconds. Still smiling. Still staring. I ran. Crashed through the underbrush, not caring about the branches scratching my arms. Behind me I could hear him, not running, walking, but somehow keeping pace with me. Branches snapped, leaves rustled, and sometimes I heard him laugh, a low chuckle that made my skin crawl. I burst out of the trees onto another trail. This one led to the lake. Not the way I wanted to go, but I didn't care. I just needed to get away from him. I ran along the lake trail for what felt like hours, but was probably only 10 minutes. Finally, I saw the parking area ahead. There was a family loading up their car after a picnic. I ran straight to them. "Please," I gasped. "There's someone following me. Can you give me a ride to town?" The father looked concerned and scanned the trail behind me. "I don't see anyone," he said. I turned around. The trail was empty, but I knew he was out there, watching. The family was kind enough to drive me home. I told my parents what happened. They called the park service. A ranger came by to take my statement. He said they'd had reports of someone matching that description, always on the lesser-used trails, always in the late afternoon. They'd never caught him. and everyone who'd seen him had the same story. The bare feet, the smile, the way he moved. I never went back to that trail. I finished out the summer at the camp, but always made sure I had a ride home. A few weeks later, I saw on the news that a hiker had gone missing in that park. They found his backpack on the shortcut trail, right where it split off from the main path. They never found the hiker, but they found footprints leading into the woods, bare footprints, and they were following boot tracks, like someone had been chasing someone else. The search went on for weeks. Dogs couldn't find a scent. Helicopters saw nothing. It was like he just vanished. I think about that hiker sometimes, and I wonder if he saw the same smile I did, right before he ran. The room that shouldn't exist. This is the story that still keeps me up at night. It happened 2 months ago when I was 16. My family had just moved into a new house. Well, new to us anyway. The house itself was built in the 1920s. It was one of those big Victorian places with too many rooms. My parents got it for a great price because it needed a lot of work. The previous owners had left suddenly. The realtor said it was for a job opportunity overseas. But the neighbors told us a different story. They said the family had left in the middle of the night, packed up whatever would fit in their car, and just drove away. Left half their belongings behind. We should have listened to the neighbors. My bedroom was on the second floor at the end of a long hallway. It was actually pretty cool. Big windows, high ceilings, and this old Victorian wallpaper that my mom said was probably original. The closet was huge too, big enough to turn into a reading nook if I wanted. That first week was normal, just unpacking and getting settled. I spent most of my time arranging my room exactly how I wanted it. Then on Sunday night I noticed something odd. There was a draft coming from my closet. Not from under the door, from inside the closet itself. I opened it and felt around. The air was definitely colder in there, and it seemed to be coming from the back wall. I pushed aside my hanging clothes and looked closer. The wallpaper on the back wall had a seam, like it had been cut and repasted. I ran my finger along the seam. The paper moved. There was something behind it. I know I should have told my parents, but I was curious. What teenager wouldn't be? I carefully peeled back the wallpaper. Behind it was a door. A small door, maybe 4 feet high. It was painted the same color as the walls. That's why nobody had noticed it. There was a tiny handle. Old brass that had turned green with age. I tried it. The door was locked, but the lock was old and simple, the kind you could open with a bobby pin, which is exactly what I did. The door swung open silently. Beyond it was darkness. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. There was another room back there, a small room that shouldn't exist. It wasn't on any of the house's floor plans. My dad had showed them to me when we were fixing things. This room was maybe 6 feet by 6 feet. The ceiling was low. I had to crouch to fit inside. The walls were covered in the same wallpaper as my room, but older, more faded, and there were marks on it. Scratches, like someone had clawed at the walls. In the corner was a small bed, a child's bed, with a moldy mattress and a single pillow. On the pillow was a teddy bear, old and falling apart, one eye missing. I picked up the bear. Under it was a notebook. I opened it carefully. The pages were yellow and brittle, but I could still read what was written. It was a child's handwriting. Day 1. Mommy says I have to stay in here. She says I'm sick. Day 3. I can hear them through the walls. They're having dinner. I'm so hungry. Day 7. The scratching is back. It comes from inside the walls. I told Mommy, but she won't let me out. Day 10. I know what the scratching is now. It's the other children, the ones who were here before me. Day 15. Mommy doesn't bring food anymore, but I'm not hungry. The children in the walls feed me now. Day 20. I can fit through the cracks now, just like they showed me. Soon I'll be with them. The entries stopped there. My hands were shaking. I dropped the notebook and backed out of the room. But as I turned to leave, I heard it. Scratching, coming from inside the walls of the hidden room. Soft at first, then louder, and then I heard something that made my blood freeze. A child's voice, whispering, "Come play with us." I slammed the door shut, pushed my dresser in front of the closet, and ran downstairs. I told my parents everything, showed them the notebook. My dad went up to look. The door was gone, just solid wall where I swore it had been. But the notebook was real. My parents called the previous owners. After a lot of pressing, they finally admitted the truth. Their daughter had started talking about children in the walls, said they wanted her to come play. She'd stand in her closet for hours, talking to no one. Sometimes they'd find her trying to claw through the wallpaper. That's why they left. We lasted 2 more weeks in that house. The scratching started in other rooms, always at night, always in the walls. My little brother started having nightmares. Said a girl with no eyes was standing by his bed, asking him to come play. The final straw was when my mom saw her, a little girl in an old-fashioned nightgown, standing at the top of the stairs. She was transparent, like looking through dirty glass. When my mom blinked, she was gone, but there were small muddy footprints on the carpet. We left that night, stayed in a hotel while my parents figured out what to do. They ended up breaking the lease, lost a lot of money, but we couldn't go back. The house is empty now. There's a for sale sign out front. Sometimes I drive by, and I swear I can see shapes in the windows. Small shapes, child-sized shapes, watching, waiting. I found out later that the house had a history. In the 1950s, a family lived there. They had 6 children. One by one, the children got sick. The mother locked them in hidden rooms, said it was to stop the illness from spreading. All 6 children died. They found the bodies years later, hidden in the walls, in small rooms that shouldn't exist. The mother had gone mad, said the children weren't really dead, said they still talked to her through the walls. She died in an asylum, still claiming her children were just playing hide and seek. Sometimes I dream about that house, about the hidden room, about the notebook, and in my dreams I hear them, all of them, scratching at the walls, whispering through the cracks, "Come play with us. We've been waiting so long. Just crawl through the walls. It's easy once you learn how." I wake up screaming. My parents want me to see a therapist, but how do I explain? How do I tell someone that there are things in this world that shouldn't exist? Hidden rooms, hidden children, hidden horrors that wait in the dark. All I know is this: if you ever find a door that shouldn't be there, A room that's not on any blueprint. A space that doesn't belong. Don't open it. Don't look inside. Some doors are meant to stay closed. Some rooms are meant to stay hidden. And some children are meant to stay lost. Because once you find them, once you hear them calling, they never really let you go. They're always there. In the walls, in the shadows, in the spaces between. Waiting, scratching, calling, and one day you might just answer. The voices in the attic. I was 11 years old when we moved into my grandmother's house after she passed away. It was a big old farmhouse way out in the countryside. The kind of place where your nearest neighbor was a mile down the road. My parents said we were lucky to inherit it. I didn't feel lucky. From the first night, I knew something was wrong with that house. It started with the sounds from the attic. Footsteps. Slow and heavy, like someone was pacing back and forth. My parents said it was just the old house settling. Or maybe squirrels. But I knew better. Squirrels don't walk like people. And houses don't settle in perfect rhythmic patterns. Every night around midnight the footsteps would start. Back and forth. Back and forth. Right above my bedroom. I tried sleeping with headphones on. But somehow I could still hear them. Like the sound was coming from inside my head. After a week of no sleep, I finally worked up the courage to investigate. I waited until my parents were asleep. Then I crept out into the hallway. The pull-down ladder to the attic was at the end of the hall. I'd never been up there before. Grandma always kept it locked. Said it was full of junk and dust. Not safe for children. But the padlock was gone now. Just an empty hasp where it used to be. I pulled the cord and the ladder came down with a loud creak. I froze, waiting for my parents to wake up. But the house stayed quiet, except for the footsteps above. They had stopped when I pulled down the ladder, like whatever was up there had heard me, and was waiting. I climbed up slowly. Each rung of the ladder groaned under my weight. My flashlight beam shook in my trembling hand. The attic was bigger than I expected. It ran the whole length of the house. Boxes and old furniture were stacked everywhere. Everything was covered in thick dust, except for a path through the middle. A clear path where someone had been walking. Recently, I followed the path deeper into the attic, past old wardrobes and steamer trunks, past stacks of mouldering books. The path led to the far end of the attic, to a small clear area, and in that area was a rocking chair. It was moving, slowly rocking back and forth, but no one was sitting in it. I should have run. Every part of my brain was screaming at me to get out, but I couldn't move. I was frozen in place, watching that empty chair rock. Then I heard it. A whisper, so quiet I almost missed it. Finally, someone came. The voice was old and scratchy, like dry leaves rustling together. I've been waiting so long. I turned my flashlight in every direction, but there was no one there. Just me and that rocking chair. Who are you? I managed to whisper. The chair stopped rocking. Don't you recognize me, dear? And suddenly I could see her. Not clearly, more like a memory of a person. Sitting in the chair was an old woman, but I could see through her to the wall behind. She looked like my grandmother, but wrong somehow. Her face was too thin, her eyes too dark, her smile too wide. "Grandma," I whispered. She laughed. It sounded like breaking glass. Oh no, dear. I'm what came before. I took a step back. Before. Your grandmother kept me up here, locked away. Said I was too dangerous for the world below. The thing that looked like my grandmother stood up. It moved wrong, like a marionette with tangled strings. But she's gone now, and the lock is broken, and you've come to set me free. I ran down the path through the boxes to the ladder. I practically fell down it in my hurry, pulled it up behind me, and ran to my parents' room. I shook them awake, told them everything about the footsteps, the chair, the thing that looked like Grandma. They didn't believe me at first, said I'd had a nightmare, but then we all heard it. Footsteps above us, not pacing this time, walking toward the attic entrance. My dad grabbed a baseball bat and went to investigate. My mom and I waited in their bedroom. We heard him pull down the ladder, heard him climb up. Then silence. Long, terrible silence. After 10 minutes, my mom called up to him. David, are you okay? No answer. She called again. This time we heard footsteps coming down the ladder, slow and careful. My dad appeared in the doorway, but something was wrong with his face. He was smiling, the same too wide smile I'd seen on the thing in the attic. Everything's fine, he said, but his voice was different. Older, scratchier, just some boxes that fell over. Go back to sleep. My mom started to relax, but I grabbed her arm. That's not Dad, I whispered. She looked at me, then back at him, and I think she saw it too. The way he stood too still, the way his eyes didn't blink, the way his smile never wavered. David, she said carefully, what's our dog's name? We didn't have a dog, never had. It was a test. The thing wearing my dad's face tilted its head. Why? Spots, of course. My mom grabbed me and we ran. Out of the bedroom, down the stairs, out the front door. We got in the car and drove. Behind us I could see figures in the windows of the house, watching us leave. We called the police from a gas station, told them someone had broken into our house. They went to investigate, found my dad unconscious in the attic. He was okay physically, but he couldn't remember anything after climbing the ladder. We never went back to that house. My parents arranged for movers to get our things. The movers said the strangest thing. They said someone had nailed the attic shut from the inside, and they could hear voices up there, multiple voices, having a conversation. They left without finishing the job. The house is still there, empty now. Sometimes teenagers dare each other to go inside. Most don't make it past the front door. The few that do say they hear footsteps upstairs, and voices in the attic. Lots of voices, having the same conversation over and over, about how someone needs to come let them out, how they've been waiting so long, how hungry they are. Last month the house burned down. The fire department said it was arson, but they never found who did it. I have my suspicions though, because the night before the fire I got a call. No number on the caller ID. When I answered, all I heard was my grandmother's voice, her real voice. It's done, she said. They're locked away again, but not here. Somewhere else now. Stay away from old houses, dear. Stay away from locked doors. Some things should never be set free. Then the line went dead. I took her advice. I live in a new apartment building now. Everything is modern and bright. No attics, no basements, no locked rooms. But sometimes late at night I still hear them. Footsteps above me, even though I live on the top floor. The man who wasn't there. I need to tell you about what happened when I was 12. About the man who lived in our house. The man nobody else could see. It started the summer after we moved to Seattle. My dad had gotten a new job and we'd left everything behind in Texas. I wasn't happy about it. New city, new school, no friends. The house was nice enough, I guess. A two-story craftsman in an old neighborhood. Big trees lining the street. The kind of place where people actually knew their neighbors. My room was in the back corner of the second floor. It had 2 windows, one facing the backyard and one facing the side of the house. That side window looked out onto a narrow space between our house and the neighbors, maybe 3 feet wide, full of old leaves and shadows. I didn't like that window. Something about that narrow space made me uncomfortable, so I kept those curtains closed. The first time I saw him was on a Tuesday morning. I was getting dressed for summer camp, pulling on my shirt when I felt eyes on me. You know that feeling, when you just know someone's watching. I turned toward the side window. The curtains were open. I knew I'd closed them the night before. I always closed them. But there they were, wide open. And standing in that narrow space was a man, just standing there, facing my window. He was tall and thin, wearing a dark suit like he was going to a funeral. His face was pale, too pale, like paper, and he was smiling. Not a nice smile, the kind of smile that made my stomach hurt. I screamed and ran downstairs. My mom came running. There's a man outside my window. She followed me back to my room. But when we looked out the window, the space was empty, just leaves and shadows. Mom went outside to check. The gate to that side area was still locked. No footprints in the leaves. No sign anyone had been there. She said I must have imagined it. Maybe a shadow from the trees. But I knew what I'd seen. That night I made sure the curtains were closed tight. I even put a chair in front of them. But when I woke up the next morning, the chair had been moved, and the curtains were open again. This time he was closer, close enough that I could see his eyes. They were wrong, all black, no white parts at all, like looking into holes. He raised one hand and waved at me, slow and deliberate, like we were old friends. I didn't scream this time. I just backed away from the window, grabbed my phone and took a picture. But when I looked at the photo, there was nothing there, just the empty space between the houses, even though I could still see him standing there, still waving. I closed the curtains and pushed my dresser in front of them. Then I went downstairs and refused to go back to my room. My parents were getting frustrated. They thought I was making it up, acting out because of the move. My dad even went into the side space with a flashlight. Found nothing. But that night I slept on the couch. And in the morning, when I went to get clothes from my room, the dresser had been moved. The curtains were open, and there was a handprint on the glass, on the inside of the window. My parents couldn't explain that. The window was locked, had been locked the whole time, but there was definitely a handprint, too big to be mine, with too many fingers. My dad cleaned it off but it came back the next day, and the next, always in the same spot, like someone pressing their hand against the glass, trying to get in. After a week of this, my parents finally believed something was wrong. They moved me to the guest room at the front of the house. For a few days things were normal. No weird curtains, no handprints, no man in the side space. Then I made a mistake. I went back to get something from my old room. Just a quick trip to grab a book. The curtains were closed like we'd left them, but I could hear something, tapping, soft and rhythmic, coming from the window. I should have left, should have just forgotten the book, but I had to look. I pulled back the curtain just a tiny bit. He was there, but not in the side space. He was pressed against the window. His whole body flat against the glass like he was trying to push through it. His mouth was open, too wide, and he was saying something, the same words over and over. I couldn't hear through the glass, but I could read his lips. Let me in, let me in, let me in. I stumbled backwards and fell. The curtain swung fully open, and I saw that he wasn't alone. There were others behind him, dozens of them, all pressed into that narrow space, all in dark suits, all with those black hole eyes, all with their mouths open, all saying the same thing. Let me in. I ran screaming from the room. My parents called the police this time, but when the officers checked, there was nothing there. No people, no signs of anyone, just that handprint on the inside of the glass. And now there were more of them, covering the whole window, different sizes, some adult, some child-sized, all with too many fingers. We stayed in a hotel that night. My parents were thoroughly freaked out now. They started researching the history of the house. What they found made everything worse. In 1987, there had been a gas leak in the neighborhood. Carbon monoxide. Several families died in their sleep, including the family that lived in our house. They were found weeks later. The strange thing was they were all in one room, the back corner bedroom, my bedroom, all of them pressed against the side window, like they'd been trying to get out, but the window had been painted shut years before. They couldn't open it. The autopsy said they'd been hallucinating from the gas, probably didn't even know what they were doing. But the neighbors reported something else. They said that for weeks after the bodies were removed, they could still see figures in that window, pale faces pressed against the glass. The house had been sold 5 times since then. No family lasted more than a year. We made it 3 months. The last straw was when my little sister saw them. She'd been playing in the backyard, came running in crying about the people in the window. They want to come inside, she sobbed. They said they live here too. We left that day. Didn't even pack properly. Just threw what we could in the car and left. The house is still for sale. Has been for years now. The realtor had to disclose the deaths after what happened with us. Nobody wants to buy it. Sometimes I drive by when I'm in town. I can't help myself. The side window is boarded up now, but I swear I can still see shadows moving behind the boards. And if you look closely at the wood, you can see marks, like someone's been pushing from the other side, trying to get out, or trying to get in. I'm not sure which is worse. The girl in the mirror. This happened when I was 13, and I still can't look in mirrors the same way. We lived in a small apartment in Chicago. Just me, my mom, and my little brother. The apartment was cramped, but it was all we could afford. I shared a room with my brother, which meant zero privacy. The only place I could be alone was the bathroom. It was tiny, just a toilet, sink, and shower. But it had a big mirror that took up most of one wall. One of those old mirrors with the medicine cabinet behind it. I spent a lot of time in there, doing my hair, trying on makeup, normal 13-year-old girl stuff. That's when I first noticed something was off. I was brushing my teeth before bed, making faces at myself in the mirror like I always did, when my reflection didn't match. It was subtle, just a split-second delay. I'd smile, and then my reflection would smile, like it was copying me instead of being me. I figured I was just tired, but it kept happening. Little things at first. I'd turn my head, and my reflection would turn a moment later. I'd raise my hand, and there'd be that tiny delay. Never enough for anyone else to notice. But I noticed. After a week of this, I started avoiding the mirror. I'd brush my teeth looking down, do my hair without checking it. But sometimes I'd catch glimpses, and what I saw got worse. My reflection started doing things I wasn't doing. I'd be brushing my hair, and in the corner of my eye, I'd see my reflection just standing there, watching me. Not brushing, just watching. When I'd look directly at it, everything would be normal again. Perfect reflection, perfect match. But I knew something was wrong. Then came the night I saw her clearly. I'd gotten up to use the bathroom. It was probably 3 in the morning. I was half asleep and forgot about the mirror thing. Just stumbled in and flipped on the light. My reflection was already there, standing in front of the mirror. But I had just walked in. She was wearing my pajamas, had my face, my hair, everything. But she was already there waiting. We stared at each other, me in the doorway, her in the mirror. Then she smiled. I wasn't smiling. Finally, she said. Her mouth moved, but the voice came from all around me. I've been waiting for you to see me. Really see me. I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. We've been sharing this mirror for so long, but you never noticed before. She stepped closer to the glass, put her hand against it from her side. I'm tired of being the reflection. I want to be the real one. I backed out of the bathroom and slammed the door. Spent the rest of the night on the couch. Told myself it was a dream. But in the morning there was a handprint on the mirror. From the inside. My mom complained about it. Said I needed to clean the mirror better. But I hadn't touched it. I started using the kitchen sink to brush my teeth. Washing my face with the water bottle in my room. Anything to avoid that bathroom. My mom thought I was being dramatic. But I couldn't tell her the truth. She'd think I was crazy. For 2 weeks I managed to avoid the mirror completely. Then my little brother got sick. Stomach flu. He was in the bathroom throwing up and needed help. I had to go in. The mirror was covered with a towel. My mom had hung it there to dry. I felt safer with it covered. I helped my brother and was about to leave when I heard it. Tapping. From behind the towel. I can see you, the voice said. My reflection's voice. The towel doesn't matter. I'm always here. Always watching. I grabbed my brother and got out of there. That night I made a decision. I had to face whatever this was. I waited until everyone was asleep. Then I went to the bathroom with a hammer. I was going to break the mirror. Get rid of it. End this whole thing. I pulled off the towel. She was there. right up against the glass. Her face pressed against it, features distorted. "You can't break it," she said. "Break the mirror and you break the barrier. Then I'll really be free." I lowered the hammer. "What do you want?" "To trade places. Just for a day. Let me be real. Let me live." "No." Her face changed, became angry, dark. "Then I'll take it anyway." The mirror started to crack. Not from outside, from inside. Spider web fractures spreading from where she was pressing against it. I ran. The next morning the mirror was whole again, but something had changed. My reflection was getting stronger. I'd catch glimpses of her in other mirrors now. Store windows, car mirrors, phone screens. Always there, always watching, always waiting, and getting closer. My mom finally noticed something was wrong when she caught me covering every reflective surface in our room. I broke down and told her everything. She didn't believe me at first, not until she saw it herself. We were in the bathroom together. She was trying to prove nothing was wrong, standing next to me in front of the mirror. Our reflections looked normal. Then mine waved. Neither of us had moved. My mom's face went white. We moved out the next week. Stayed with my aunt while looking for a new place. But it didn't matter. She followed me. In every mirror. In every reflection. Getting stronger. Getting closer to breaking through. I don't use mirrors anymore. Haven't in 3 years. I do everything by touch. My friends think I'm vain. Think I'm always checking my appearance. But I'm not checking. I'm avoiding. Because she's still there. Still waiting. And one day when I'm not careful, when I forget and look too long, she'll break through. And then which one of us will be the reflection? The basement children. I was 14 when my family bought the old Riverside Youth Center to convert into a home. The place had been abandoned for 20 years. The city sold it to us for almost nothing. Should have been our first warning. It was a massive building, 3 stories plus a basement, used to house troubled kids back in the 60s and 70s. My parents had grand plans to renovate it, turn it into their dream home. We moved in before the renovations started. My parents wanted to get a feel for the space. Big mistake. The basement was the worst part. It was huge, ran the entire length of the building. Concrete walls and floors. No windows. The old fluorescent lights still worked, but they flickered constantly. Made everything look sick and green. There were still remnants from when it was a youth center. Metal bed frames, old desks, filing cabinets full of moldy papers. And the rooms. So many small rooms. They called them quiet rooms in the old files we found, where they put kids who misbehaved. Concrete boxes with heavy doors. No windows. Some still had locks on the outside. My little sister Emma loved exploring down there. She was only 8 and thought it was like a big adventure. I tried to tell her it was creepy, but she didn't listen. Said she liked playing hide and seek in all the rooms. The first sign something was wrong came 2 weeks after we moved in. Emma had made a new friend. She called him Timothy. Said he lived in the basement. My parents thought it was just an imaginary friend, but I knew better, because I'd heard voices down there too. Children's voices, whispering, laughing, crying, always just at the edge of hearing. When you turned to look, there was never anyone there. Just empty rooms and flickering lights. Emma started spending all her time in the basement. She'd disappear for hours. When we'd find her, she'd be sitting in one of those quiet rooms, talking to empty air, having full conversations with Timothy. She'd get upset when we interrupted, said we were being rude to her friend. Then she started talking about the other children, said Timothy wasn't alone down there. There were lots of kids. They'd been there a long time. Waiting. Waiting for what? I asked her once. For someone to let them out, she said. That night I did something stupid. I went down to the basement alone. I wanted to prove there was nothing there. That Emma was just imagining things. The lights were flickering worse than usual, creating moving shadows on the walls. I walked through the main area, past the old bed frames, to the hallway with the quiet rooms. That's when I heard it. Crying. Soft sobbing coming from one of the rooms. The door was closed but not locked. I pushed it open. The room was empty. Just concrete walls and floor. But the crying was louder now, coming from the corner. I stepped inside. The door slammed shut behind me. The lights went out. Complete darkness. And the crying stopped, replaced by breathing. Lots of breathing. Like the room was full of people, all breathing at different rhythms. I scrambled for the door, found the handle. It wouldn't budge. The breathing got closer, and then I felt them. Cold hands, small hands, children's hands, touching my arms, my face, my hair, dozens of them, and voices, whispering, "Stay with us, play with us, don't leave us alone again." I screamed, pounded on the door. The lights flickered back on. The room was empty, but I could still feel them, cold spots moving around me, invisible hands tugging at my clothes. The door suddenly opened. My dad was there. He'd heard me screaming. I ran past him, up the stairs. Didn't stop until I was outside. I refused to go back in the basement after that. But Emma kept going. She started looking different, paler, thinner. Her eyes had dark circles, and she was always cold, ice cold. She'd started bringing things up from the basement. Old toys, she said the other kids gave her. Dolls with missing eyes. Stuffed animals that smelled like mold. Games with pieces missing. My parents were getting worried. They tried to ban her from the basement, but she'd sneak down anyway. We'd find her in those quiet rooms, and she wasn't alone anymore. We could see them now. Faint outlines of children, transparent, like looking through dirty water. Dozens of them, all in old-fashioned clothes, all pale and thin, all with dark, sunken eyes. They'd disappear when adults came near, but I could see them clearly, surrounding Emma, touching her, whispering to her. The breaking point came when Emma tried to lock herself in one of the quiet rooms. Said the other kids told her it was the only way to stay with them forever. My dad had to break the door down. Emma was unconscious, barely breathing, ice cold. The hospital couldn't explain what was wrong. Her body temperature was dangerously low, but she didn't have hypothermia. She kept mumbling about her friends, about how they were lonely, how they'd been locked away for so long, how they just wanted someone to play with. That's when we found out the truth about the Riverside Youth Center. It had been shut down after a scandal. Kids had died. Lots of kids. Locked in those quiet rooms and forgotten. Some for days. Some longer. The official report said neglect. But the workers who were interviewed told different stories. Stories about kids who wouldn't come out, who had to be dragged from the rooms, who said there were others in there with them, others who couldn't leave. The center was shut down overnight. The surviving kids were transferred, but some staff swore the building wasn't empty, that you could still hear them, the ones who didn't make it out. We left that night, took Emma straight from the hospital to my grandparents' house, never went back. Emma recovered slowly, but she never forgot her friends in the basement. Sometimes she still talks about them, says they're still there, still waiting, still lonely. The building is empty again now. For sale sign out front, but it never sells. People who tour it say the basement is the problem. Too cold, too dark, and the quiet rooms. The doors won't stay open. They swing shut on their own and lock from the inside, like someone's still in there, still playing hide and seek, still waiting for a friend. The real estate agent stopped showing the basement, but it doesn't matter, because sometimes, late at night, people see lights down there, flickering, moving from room to room, like children playing. And if you listen carefully, if you stand outside on a quiet night, you can hear them, laughing, crying, calling, "Come play with us. We're so lonely. Don't leave us alone." Forever and ever and ever. The thing in the walls. I was 15 when it started. The scratching in the walls. We just moved into an old townhouse in Baltimore. One of those narrow brick buildings squeezed between identical neighbors. The place was a fixer-upper. Needed new everything according to my parents. But it was all they could afford in the city. My room was on the 3rd floor. Used to be an attic. Small and cramped with slanted ceilings. But it was mine alone. No more sharing with my younger brother. The first night I heard it. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Like fingernails on wood. Coming from inside the wall next to my bed. I figured it was mice. Old house problems. I banged on the wall. The scratching stopped. For about 10 seconds. Then it came back. Louder. More insistent. Scratch, scratch, scratch. I told my dad the next morning. He said he'd put out some traps. But the scratching wasn't random like mice would be. It had a pattern. 3 scratches. Pause. 3 more. Pause. Over and over. And it followed me. When I moved to the other side of the room, it would start up in that wall. When I went downstairs, it would move to the ceiling. Always the same pattern. Always just loud enough to hear. After a week, I was going crazy from lack of sleep. That's when I noticed the wallpaper in my room. It was old. Probably original to the house. Faded yellow with little blue flowers. But in one spot next to my bed, the pattern was different. The flowers were arranged in letters. Tiny letters that spelled out words. Help me. I scraped at the wallpaper. It came off in strips, revealing more writing underneath. Layer after layer of wallpaper, each with messages written in the pattern. Trapped. Can't get out. Please. IT hurts. Let me out. The scratching got frantic as I pulled off the paper. Like whatever was in there could tell I was getting closer. Under all the layers I found wood. Old panels that didn't match the rest of the wall. One panel was loose. I pried at it with my fingernails. It popped free. Behind it was a space, maybe 2 feet wide, a hidden cavity between my room and the outer wall. And inside, oh God, there were scratch marks everywhere, deep gouges in the wood, thousands of them, and fingernails, broken fingernails embedded in the walls, human fingernails. I screamed. My parents came running. They saw the hole, the scratches, the nails. My dad called the police. They brought in investigators, took photos, measured the space. It was just big enough for a person, a small person. They found more. Hair caught in the splinters, scraps of fabric, and carved into the wood over and over. Sarah Marsh, 1892, help me, help me, help me. The investigation turned up old records. The house had belonged to the Marsh family in the 1890s. They had a daughter named Sarah. She disappeared when she was 15, same age as me. Her parents said she ran away, but there were rumors. Neighbors heard screaming, saw her father boarding up walls, claimed he was doing renovations. Sarah was never found, until now. They opened up more of the wall, found bones, small bones, a child's skeleton curled up in that tiny space. She'd been walled in alive, scratched at the walls until her fingers bled, until her nails tore off, until she died. The medical examiner said it would have taken days, maybe a week, in the dark, in that tiny space. Scratching. We moved out immediately, stayed in a hotel while my parents looked for a new place, but I still heard it, the scratching, in the hotel walls, in the car, in my dreams, always the same pattern. 3 scratches, pause, 3 more, SOS in Morse code. I looked it up. She'd been calling for help for over 100 years, and no one heard her, no one but me. We moved across town, new house, new walls, no scratching, for a while. Then it started again, faint at first, but getting louder, and I knew Sarah wasn't done. She'd been found, but she wasn't at rest. She was angry, angry at being ignored for so long, angry at dying alone in the dark, and she'd followed me, the girl who finally heard her. The scratching got worse, moved from the walls to the floors, the ceilings, the windows. My parents thought I was having a breakdown, sent me to therapy, put me on medication. But the pills didn't stop the scratching, or the dreams. Dreams where I was in that wall, in the dark, unable to move, unable to breathe, scratching until my fingers bled, until my nails tore off, until I died. But in the dreams I didn't stay dead. I kept scratching, from the other side, trying to get back out, trying to get back to the world of the living. The dreams felt so real. I'd wake up with splinters in my fingers, dirt under my nails. My parents found me sleepwalking, standing at walls, scratching at them, my fingernails bloody. They put me in the hospital, psychiatric ward, said I was hurting myself, having delusions. But the scratching followed me there too. The other patients heard it. The nurses pretended not to, but I saw them flinch when it got loud, saw them avoid my room at night. One night a nurse finally admitted it. She'd worked there 20 years. Said every few years they'd get a patient who heard scratching. Always teenagers. Always girls. Always 15. They'd all had the same dreams. Same injuries. Same story about finding something in their walls. Most got better when they turned 16. Like whatever was haunting them lost interest. But some didn't. Some kept hearing it. Keep scratching. Until she didn't finish. But I saw the old records she showed me. 3 girls over the years. All 15 when it started. All found the same way. Walled up in their rooms. Alive when it happened. Dead when found. Their parents swore they'd done it themselves. Impossibly walled themselves in. But that was crazy, wasn't it? I turned 16 last month. The scratching hasn't stopped. It's gotten worse. And I've started doing things. Things I don't remember. My parents found me in the basement with a hammer. I'd knocked a hole in the wall. Was trying to climb inside. They stopped me just in time. But I wanted to go in. Needed to go in. Something was calling me. Sarah was calling me. She's tired of being alone. Tired of scratching by herself. She wants company. Wants someone who understands. Someone who heard her call. Someone who answered. I try to fight it. Stay away from walls. Sleep in the middle of rooms. But she's patient. She waited 100 years. She can wait a little longer. And every night the scratching gets louder. The walls get thinner. The space between here and there gets smaller. Soon I won't be able to resist. Soon I'll answer her call. Crawl into that dark space. Let the walls close behind me. And then there will be 2 of us. Scratching. Calling. Waiting. For the next girl. The next 15-year-old. The next one to hear our call. Because Sarah taught me something. Some prisons aren't made of walls. Some are made of loneliness. Of being forgotten. Of screaming into the void and having no one here. And the only escape is to pull someone else in. To make them understand. To make them stay. Forever. So if you hear scratching in your walls. If you find messages hidden in wallpaper. If you dream of dark spaces and broken fingernails. Don't investigate. Don't answer. Don't let us in. Because we're so lonely. So tired. So desperate for company. And once you hear us, really hear us, you're already ours. The scratching has stopped now. For the first time in months. Complete silence. And that's how I know. Tonight's the night. She's done calling. I'm coming. Whether I want to or not. I can feel the walls calling me. Feel the spaces between them. Dark and narrow and waiting. My parents are asleep. They won't hear me leave my room. Won't hear the hammering. Won't hear the walls closing. Won't hear anything until morning, when they find my bed empty, and hear new scratching in the walls. 2 patterns now. Both desperate. Both pleading. Both waiting. For you. The school bus stop. This is the last story I'll tell. The one that happened most recently. 6 months ago, when I had just turned 16. We'd moved to a rural town in Pennsylvania. Population maybe 3,000. The kind of place where everybody knows everybody. Where nothing ever happens. Until it does. Our house was at the end of a long dirt road. No other houses for half a mile in any direction. Just woods and fields. The school bus picked me up at 6:30 every morning, right at the end of our driveway where it met the main road. I had to walk about 200 yards in the dark, my phone flashlight lighting the way. It was October when I first saw him, standing at the bus stop, right where I usually waited. An old man in overalls and a plaid shirt, just standing there in the dark. I stopped about 20 feet away. Hello, I called out. He turned to look at me. His face was wrong, too long, too thin. His eyes reflected my flashlight like an animal's. Waiting for the bus, he said. His voice sounded rusty, like he hadn't used it in a long time. The school bus? I asked. He nodded slowly. Been waiting a long time. Something about the way he said it made my skin crawl. I backed away, walked back to the house, told my mom I felt sick. She drove me to school that day, but I couldn't avoid the bus forever. The next morning, I made my dad walk me to the stop. Nobody was there. Just the usual empty road. Dad waited with me until the bus came, said I was being silly. But that afternoon, when the bus dropped me off, he was there again. The old man, standing right where the bus left me. You came back, he said. I ran, all the way to the house. Didn't look back once. My parents were both at work. Wouldn't be home for hours. I locked all the doors. Sat in the living room with every light on, watching out the window. He stood at the end of the driveway until dark, never moving, just standing, waiting. That night I did research on our property, found old newspaper articles online. In 1978, a school bus had crashed on our road, right where my bus stop was. 3 kids died, and the bus driver, an old man named William Thorne. The article had a photo. It was him, the man at the bus stop, but 40 years younger. Same long face, same strange eyes, same plaid shirt. The article said he'd swerved to avoid something in the road. The bus had flipped. He'd been thrown through the windshield. The kids who survived said something strange. They said right before the crash Mr. Thorne had been talking to himself, arguing with someone who wasn't there, yelling at them to get off his bus. Then he'd yanked the wheel hard to the right, like he was trying to hit something, or avoid something. Nobody ever figured out what. I showed my parents the article, told them about the old man. They didn't believe me, said I was scaring myself with ghost stories, but they agreed to drive me to school for a week, just to make me feel better. On Monday, I thought things would be okay, but when I got on the bus that afternoon, something was different. The driver was different. It was him, William Thorne, sitting behind the wheel, smiling at me with too many teeth. Come on, girlie, he said. Sit up front, right behind me. The other kids didn't seem to notice anything wrong. They got on like normal, talking and laughing. But the driver wasn't normal, wasn't really there. I could see through him to the real driver behind, like a double exposure. 2 drivers in the same seat. I sat in the very back, as far from him as possible, but I could see him in the big mirror, watching me, that smile never leaving his face. The bus ride took forever. Every stop seemed to last hours, and the old man kept talking. 40 years I've been driving this route. 40 years of the same roads, same stops, same crash. over and over. But this time will be different. This time I know what's coming. This time I can avoid it. Nobody else heard him. Just me. When we reached my stop, I ran for the door. But it wouldn't open. The real driver was pressing the button. But the doors stayed closed. Not yet, William Thorne said. Not until you see. See what really happened. The world outside the windows changed. It wasn't afternoon anymore. It was night. 40 years ago night. And there was something in the road. Something tall and thin. Something that shouldn't exist. It stood in the headlights. Arms too long. Legs bent wrong. Face that wasn't quite human. That's what I saw, the old man said. That's what I tried to avoid. But you can't avoid destiny. Can't change what's meant to happen. The crash has to happen. The children have to die. I have to die. Over and over. Unless... He turned to look at me. Not just his head. His whole body twisted around while his hands stayed on the wheel. Unless someone takes my place. Someone young. Someone who can see both worlds. Someone like you. The bus started to speed up, heading straight for the thing in the road. Just like 40 years ago. I could hear the other kids now. Screaming. But not the real kids. The ghost kids. The ones who died in the crash. They were on the bus too. Pale and broken. Reaching for me. Join us. Take his place. Drive the bus. Forever and ever. The thing in the road got closer. Its mouth opened. Too many teeth. Too many eyes. Too many arms reaching. This was it. The moment of the crash. But then I remembered something. The article said 3 kids died. But there had been 20 on the bus. 17 survived. Because they were in the back. Away from the impact. I grabbed onto the seat. Held on tight. Screamed at the top of my lungs. Not the ghost scream. A real scream. In the real world. The real driver heard me. Slammed on the brakes. The bus screeched to a stop. Right at my driveway. Right where it was supposed to. The doors opened. I ran. Behind me I heard William Thorne laughing. You can't run forever. Every day you have to get on this bus. Every day I'll be waiting. And one day you'll be tired. One day you won't fight. One day you'll take the wheel. My parents finally believed me when the bus driver reported what happened. Said I'd had some kind of seizure. Screaming about crashes and dead children. They pulled me out of school. Started homeschooling. No more bus rides. But I still see him sometimes. Standing at the end of the driveway. Waiting. Always waiting. And sometimes late at night I hear it. The sound of a bus. Air brakes hissing. Engine rumbling. Stopping right outside my window. Doors opening. Waiting for me to get on. To take my seat. To take the wheel. To drive the same route. Forever. The other kids in town have started seeing him too. The ones who ride the bus. They say there's a weird old man who sometimes drives. See-through. Like a ghost. Always watching one particular empty seat. Right behind the driver. My seat. Waiting for me to come back. And the thing is, sometimes I want to. Sometimes the calling is so strong. The need to get on that bus. To sit in that seat. To take that wheel. To complete the cycle. Because William Thorne was right about one thing. You can't avoid destiny, can't change what's meant to happen. And every morning at 6:30 I stand at my window, watch the end of the driveway, see him there, patient, eternal, inevitable. One day I'll give in. One day I'll walk down that driveway, get on that bus, take my place in the cycle, and then it'll be my turn to wait at bus stops, to look for the one who can see both worlds, to pass on the curse, the obligation, the eternal route that never ends. But not today. Today I'm still fighting, still resisting, still trying to avoid my destiny, even though I know it's pointless, because the bus always comes, the driver always waits, and sooner or later, everyone has to get on.
Thank you.